Hey, good Sunday, everybody. What is up, sir? What is up, Greg? How you doing, bud?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good on this fine, sunny, well, not so sunny anymore because I'm on the East Coast, but it was a good day today. Super hot, super hot. By the way, in Cali, where you are, are you been getting like really extremely hot temperatures?
No, I live pretty close to the coast. I live right where you can kind of feel the weather change slightly from coastal to slightly to inland, but we are 40 degrees less than Palm Springs today.
Wow, 40? Okay, that's a massive difference. So
one of the things I loved when I moved here about Southern California was the learning to understand the microclimates, and that's a phrase they use, and just understanding how like just moving around sometimes a few miles can really change.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Amazing. Yeah. Well, I hope the rest of you are feeling cool with your aircon. Those of you who are sweating it out to the oldies, like I have been. Let me see who is here right now as you slowly trickle in, as usual. Mr. Redjack, I don't know if you're here, but thank you for coming in early as always and welcoming everyone. I appreciate that. Jason, I saw you come in. Good evening to you. A couple minutes early. That's always nice to make up for all those people who come in several minutes late. So I appreciate that. Oh, my lovely wife. There you go, Vivian. What's up? Thank you as always. Very nice of you. And what else we got? Number one Marvel fan and sometimes DC fan, Tom. What is up, Tom? Good to see you. Hi, Tom. Good evening, all. What's up, CJ? Good to see you as always, CJ. Appreciate it. And look at that. My wife is welcoming you back. See, she remembers you were already.
There you go.
Thanks, honey. That's very awesome of you. Appreciate it. Of course, everybody's saying hi to everybody else. Hi, all. I'm on time for a change.
Hey,
well, it's not Lee like you have to be here on time. You can always catch what you miss on rewind if you have to. But I appreciate that, though. So thank you. Truth be told, everyone, Lee and I were speaking. He emailed me earlier, and I replied to him. And so I knew he was going to be here. So thanks for being on time, Lee. I appreciate that, man. Tops of the evening. Very nice.
Nice, Marcus.
Thanks, Marcus, to come up with the cool little the pun, of course, you know.
Nice.
Awesome. That is awesome. Who else we got? The Marvel fan is saying, time for some GG. Don't know what that means.
I think that's me. Get it, Greg Goldstein, GG.
Oh, some GG, yes. Yeah, I believe you are. I never get these little puns for most of that. And it's always my guests who figure it out for me. I don't know. I appreciate that, Greg. Thank you. You're being on top of things. Hola, ¿cómo estás, Rubencito, Greg, and Chad? Good fellas. Yeah. I just watched it last week, Javi. That's why I figured I'd wear it. Yeah, we're doing good. Good to see you. And thank you for the Spanish. Spain won the Euro tournament this afternoon. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. I'm not a huge soccer fan. I'm not going to pretend that I am, but I am of Spanish Spain descent. So yeah, it's good. I like that. So that was nice to see. And who else we got? Oh, John Brown, as always. Good evening to you, my friend. And Lee, welcoming you back, Greg, of course. And yes, CJ, good new video. I'll mention that in a second once I get caught up with the hellos. Rich Cirillo, hey, it's been a couple of weeks at least. Good evening to you. Good to see you. And sweating to the oldies is Ruben's tribute to Richard Simmons. You know what's funny that I made that little joke? Completely forgetting that he just passed away. But yes, he just passed. I just heard yesterday, I think, that he had passed away. Wow.
And just remember, he was obsessed with physical fitness, and Dr. Ruth was obsessed with sex, and she lived to be about 20 years older than he did. So
yeah, imagine. So you know what you guys all need to do, everyone. You know what's more important: sex before physical fitness. All right, try to get some as much as you can. There you go. Yeah, no, she's amazing. I mean, wow, she was what, 95? I think.
So in that range, she's actually like her her daughter and my ex were friendly somehow through a mutual friend, which is kind of weird. Just small world. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, that's nice. Oh, let me get rid of my. Sorry, I don't want to hear that all night. I'll get rid of my email client. There we go.
All right.
Okay, excellent. So, Carl, what's up, Carl? Good to see you. Early. Wow. No TV with the wife tonight. What's happening?
Checking in from the beach, Carl. What beach?
Yeah. What? Hold on here, Carl. Let me put that back up. Checking in from, you're at the beach? Maybe not. So you're at the beach with the wife and the kids? Is that what you're doing? And you're in PA. What beach is there in PA? I mean, I would think you were closer to the assassination attempt yesterday.
If he's in PA, maybe he's at the Jersey Shore.
Oh, maybe.
I don't know.
Let us know, Carl. What's up, Jeff? What's up in hot Las Vegas? Speaking of heat, you must be really cooking down in Las Vegas. What's up? Good to see you. And hey, Lee, wow, the sale went through. Thanks for your advice. Always valued. Hey, man, glad I could help. That's awesome. Now, the reason, for those of you who are confused, the reason when I mentioned that Lee and I had spoken earlier is because he reached out to get my advice on something that was going on and a potential deal he had cooking. So glad to hear that it went through. So awesome. Good. Very good to hear that, Lee. Awesome.
That's great.
And howdy, the Oklahoma kid. What's up, Dwayne? Sonny. Speaking of heat, what's up, Sonny? Howdy ho. And who else we got? Hoarders High. Wow, Scott, you're here early today. Wow, that's nice. Wow, very cool. 2-time Spanish winner. Is that supposed to be winner?
2-time Spanish winner.
I'll take it. I'm pretty sure Spain had won that tournament 4 times though. Not positive, but I thought they said 4. But okay, whatever.
All right.
Champions today. That's all that matters right now, anyways. At this age is why it is called sweating to the oldies. Yeah, we're all getting older. That's for sure. That's for sure. Oh, look at that, my buddy Hart. Hello. How are you, Hart? Good to see you, my friend. Thanks for dropping in. And I hope you stick around a little while and listen to some Tall Tops tales. Hell's Bell, Jason. It is hot as balls. It's Vegas. It's
appropriate because I vaguely remember. I think the Jason comic book. I think we did a Jason Goes to Hell comic book. So I think that's right. I think we did a couple of Jason series, and I know that first issue of the first series has a glow in the dark cover, and it goes for like stupid money.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Really? Wow. You just never know, right? But every generation brings on new speculators, collectors, or whatever. So that's it. You're very right about that. I forgot about that also as well. Yeah. Shannon Doherty, 90210, for those of us who used to watch the show, passed away. Shelley Duvall, exactly. Yep. Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, it's crazy how quickly they seem to come for the celebrities. It's always like in 3s or 4s, Atlantic Beach, is that the one where Carl would be? Did he even answer that question? I don't think so.
That was Marvel. So Atlantic Beach, New York, or Atlantic Beach, New Jersey, or Atlantic Beach, Delaware, Beach,
right.
Because I'm actually from East Atlantic Beach, New York, so I want the facts.
I want the facts. Monkey Poo Poo, what's up? How you doing, Michael? Good to see you. And thank you for clearing that up, Javi. So 2-time Spanish winner on Wimbledon.
Wimbledon, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Excellent. I'm loving the Spaniard love. Excellent. Yes. I wanted to jump in really quick just to say, I appreciate that as always, Nick. Good to see the Baruch in the house. Yes, everybody. Everybody, if you don't mind, if you're here and you're watching and you haven't done so already, right somewhere right underneath where I'm pointing, there's a little thumbs up icon. If you could just click that, I'd appreciate that. Doesn't cost you anything. I don't get any money for it. Don't worry. Nick, tennis is a sport too, Ruben. I know. And I used to play it when I was younger, and I used to watch it off and on when I was younger, But I just wasn't aware of that, man. Sorry. Got to run, prepping, packing for San Diego, and grabbing dinner. Okay, have a good time, Nick, and then with your dinner, have a great time in San Diego next week. You'll probably run into Greg there. What else? Hey, what is up, Derek? Was Jason versus Leatherface under your tenure?
So I think I was there for all the Jason series that we did, but I just don't like. It's funny in getting ready for this podcast. I just can't remember which ones we did and which ones we talked about doing. But I mean, sounds right. I can't swear to it though. It could be somebody else, and I don't want to take credit for something we didn't do.
There's your answer. There's your non-answer.
New Jersey. There you go.
Atlantic City. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And hello, Nick. Hello. You should say hello. Typically, you say hello first, and then I'm here just to ask everybody to hit the like button. But I appreciate it.
Nick's back in a week and a half. I respect. I'm not ready at all, and I live here.
Yeah, exactly. I'm from Boyertown, PA, says Tom. We would go to the boardwalk at Atlantic City during the 70s. That's when you were a young kid, for sure, right?
So we would go to the boardwalk to get our drugs, but that's a whole different podcast.
Is that where you used to get the drugs? It's on the boardwalk?
No, we had our own boardwalk in Long Beach, New York. So there you go.
Long Beach, New York. Okay. So Derek follows up with, either way, I enjoyed it very much. I have a page from the book. Okay.
Yeah. Who was the artist?
Yeah, who was the artist, Derek? Let us know. And the Baruch comes in. Lights come first, Ruben. I got to keep your algorithm going up. Hey, man, like I said, I don't particularly care that much.
I love it.
That's so funny. You know that, Nick. I do it for fun. Unlike you, Nick, I don't have an account. I do have an accountant, but I don't have an accountant concerned with whether I'm making money on my YouTube channel or not. So, again, it's all for fun for me, so I don't give a flying crap. But yeah, I appreciate a like, but whatever. Like, if you don't, you don't. It doesn't change my life in any way. So, but I appreciate you, Nick. Thank you as always. I appreciate that. Boardwalk drugs are the best, says CJ. And Derek confirms it was Jeff Butler.
Steve Montan. Okay, that does sound like a Topps comic from that period. So
it sounds like a Topps comic from that period. I love that. You're so funny. You're so funny. Also, want to give a quick shout out to my newest subs, Larry Jones. Thank you, Larry, and the couple of anonymous people whose name I couldn't see because of your privacy settings. So thank you, guys. Let me also quickly do a couple of quick promos, and then we'll get into some tall Topps tales with Greg. So first, just wanted to remind you guys, for those of you who haven't subscribed yet, and if you haven't, you should. Lee Parmenter, who we were just speaking with about me having given him some advice, and he completed an art sale today. Lee has a new video, and it is comic art focus on Jim Aparo. A wonderful artist. So for that reason alone, you should check that out. And I will give you guys all a direct link. There it is. That should be a direct link to that video. So hopefully that's working. And what else? So speaking of Carl, busy with the wife and fam on the boardwalk in Atlantic City. So he put out 2 videos this week. The first one called Bagged and Boarded, new comic books for this week. So I think it's his second episode, and he talks about the books that he picked up at the comic shop this week. And tells you a little bit about what he thought about them. And I love that he's always very, very honest about what he thinks about the material. So that's great. He doesn't always just blow smoke. And so
I like the fact that you say he doesn't just always blow smoke.
He doesn't. Let me correct myself, Greg, and everyone else. He doesn't just blow smoke, everyone. He never blows smoke. How about that, Greg? How about,
time to head to the boardwalk.
Yeah, exactly. I need to get out to the beach. But check that out. That's kind of fun. And also speak, because that was the first video that Carl did. But he also did another unboxing. I think his 25th unboxing episode. A longish one this time. And so that one, if you want to see that one, the unboxing is here. You see, I love how, yeah, I got to post it up now, right? To make it official, Carl. All right, I clarified, Carl. I clarified. So there's the one for the unboxing, everybody. Check that out if you haven't done so already. And Lee, hold on. Lee had said, let me see. I noticed the t-shirt you're wearing. Is that to celebrate your recent mobster marathon? It is, Lee. It is. I mean, that was one of the ones that we had watched. I was trying to introduce my almost 15-year-old daughter, whose birthday is this coming Wednesday. And she wanted to. She was curious about them. She had heard about them, so she wanted to see these Goodfellas and The Godfather and whatnot. And so that's why I decided to put it on. I think I've worn it on camera before, so just in case you haven't seen it, that's what it is.
That's nice.
Another person who passed away not that long ago, and I used to love him.
Crazy.
Yeah. So that's sad as well. And who else we got? Dwayne says, I've stayed up all night for months worrying if Ruben gets paid from thumbs up. Glad it was clarified he doesn't. I know. I'm sure you've been worried that I might be getting like a 5 or 6 cent checks in the mail, from YouTube. Thanks, Dwayne. I appreciate that. Hey, what is up? Peter Rose back. Good to see you. Good to see you, man. Thanks for dropping by. Aparo is, I don't know if he's popular. He's a fan favorite, I would think, for collectors. Great artist for sure. So Peter from Kavi can never look at enough Aparo. Exactly, he's a great artist. And thanks for the promotion. Well, you're very welcome. Always glad to help out a friend, especially those of us with smaller channels, right? We need all the help we can get. So, yeah, my pleasure, man. And everybody's getting in on it. CJ says, Carl, you're a partial smoke blower. And always appreciate the kind words. I appreciate you, man. You're very welcome. My pleasure. Marcus prefers the lobster marathon.
Oh
Jason's getting in on it. Don't forget the thumbs up. Yes, exactly. Thank you, my friend. And if you don't already, how quick the years go by. Exactly, Michael. We're, like I said earlier, we're all getting older. So, exactly. It's the Shoeless Joe. Exactly. On the witness stand. Exactly. Which is funny that it's Goodfellas with the Shoeless Joe image, right?
Yeah, it's just like, it's funny. I was going to ask about that, and then I said to myself, maybe I just don't remember that image. But no. That's the Shoeless Joe one.
Yeah. Because he went, remember, in Goodfellas, he does go to testify.
Right.
But
yeah, he's a little bit, he's got a more mature face in Goodfellas.
It looks, yeah, exactly.
So
there you go.
Anyway.
Oh my gosh, been a while. Stevie B's House of Collectibles. Happy Sunday to you, my friend. Making tacos instead of Sunday gravy. Yes, gravy and not sauce. I love gravy, and I agree. There's not the same thing. Gravy is not sauce. Thank you. Thought I'd listen to some Tops Talk. Awesome. Thanks, Stevie B. Appreciate that. And Ray Liotta from Union, New Jersey, just up the parkway from Atlantic City. Wow, that's cool. Nick still here. Loves Aparo. Goodfellas, best mob movie of all time. I would say it's kind of a favorite.
My number 2 or 3 favorite, that's for sure.
Yeah. I figured for most people.
Also, back to the whole Atlantic Beach scene. There's a scene in Goodfellas filmed at the beach club in Atlantic Beach where my mom used to work, which is pretty funny. It's an early scene. It's an early scene with him and Lorraine Bracco when they first start dating, and they meet they meet the neighbor annoying kid from the Five Towns. Trivia time.
Yeah. Just saw it last week, so I remember. I usually forget these things, but
when everybody's done with the podcast tonight, they have to run and watch it again. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Stanley, I think you've asked me this on a previous episode. Not particularly. I don't do interviews. You know that, Stanley. I just chat with the people that are here in the studio. You know what I mean? Like an interview implies that, if you're doing it properly, you do a little bit of research. I don't know. You come up in advance with questions that you want to ask. I'm not a journalist. I have no interest in doing that. So it's more relaxed. That's what the premise of my whole channel is. It's just let's sit back, relax with a bunch of friends on a Sunday evening, night, and just shoot the breeze like that. So anything I ask, it's always off the cuff, kind of off the top of my head. And that's how I like to keep it, more relaxed,
The best interviewer of all time was Johnny Carson, because he gave the impression that everything was off the cuff, but everything was not off the cuff. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But that's the trick, right? Is that you're still researching and doing the work, but making it look like you didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Selling it that way, exactly. But Stanley, if you're friends with any artists and you'd like them to, I don't know, come on the show, and you want to tell them that on my channel they can curse if they want to, they can say whatever they want to, right? I'm not beholden to anyone. I don't take money from anyone for ads or anything like that. So certainly you're going to get a lot more truth on my channel than some other channels, perhaps, whatever. Because I let people say whatever they want to say, as long as they feel comfortable saying it. I'm good with that, So if you know any artists, you want them to come on and shoot the shit with me, I'd be happy to talk to an artist. That's whatever. Although, like I said, I prefer they be collectors as well of art, because it is an original art focused channel. I'm going to kind of keep it that way. Like tonight with Greg, we'll be talking about his time at Topps Comics, so it's a little bit more comic booky as opposed to original arty, but I'm sure original art will in some small ways fit in and tie in. So it's okay.
We can count on that. Don't worry.
Yeah. And I don't, and we don't do this type of thing on my channel all the time. So once in a while, I'm happy to do it. It's fun. It's not, like I said, me, I say so often that even when we do show and tells, for me personally, my favorite part of even show and tells is not the showing and the telling. It's still just the shooting the shit with all you guys and the people that are in the studio, and having everybody tell us their story, and it's not just the camaraderie of all of us involved and talking, So so doing this kind of thing once in a while, I'm very happy to do it, especially when people who have been in the business, and in particular with you, Greg, given that usually on these types of channels, when someone who has been in the business goes on to talk, typically, as you know, it'll be a creative, right? It's a writer, penciler, inker, have you, not typically someone more on the executive side, and so that's fun. And you got your stories, and like you guys remember last week, my friend John Togan was on for his show and tell, but I'm going to bring him back also, just like I'm doing it with Greg here. I'm going to bring him back because he was he was doing accounting at Image Comics when they first started up, and so he's happy to come back, and he said he's going to come back, for another episode of this series, right? Comic Art Hangout, just to tell us stories about his time then. So everybody loves those types of stories from the back, the behind the scenes stuff that the average fan typically isn't privy to, Comic Art Channel, what is up? Good to see you, my friend Jason. How you doing, buddy? And Jason, you haven't put out a video in a while. Let us know if you're working on anything, or if it's still going to be some time before you put out another one. My Blue Heaven, unofficial sequel to Good.
That's funny.
Yeah,
I like that.
Anyone from Atlantic City? I loved going on that sky thing that took you way out over the ocean. Okay, a lot of photos from that time. I used to work for Debbie Mazur's husband back in LA. She played Ray Liotta's side girl. That's right, Sandy. Know her family well. Oh, that's funny. I always liked her. She's always a good character actor. Yeah. And hey, Jewish Dragons, what's up, Ian? Good to see you here. Hey, everyone, and hope you're all well. I hope you're well. Hope you're well, Ian. Stanley would interview artists for hours and hours. Yes, we know. And he will keep begging them to stay for an extra 5 hours. Ian, it's the telling and the telling. Then the showing. Yes. At least here it is. Okay, talking to Kavi. Okay, talking to him back. Nobody expects Ruben's Spanish Inquisition of show and tell. His chief weapon is honesty. There you go. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. Mike, what's up? An image audit? We may very well be doing that. Okay, so excellent. Thank you, everybody, for allowing us that. Just so you all know, if anybody's ever been wondering, especially those of you watching this on Rewind, if you wonder, why do you guys talk so much all the time before you even get into, the crux of the show? Part of it is actually, it's not just because we just want to talk for the sake of talking. I mean, it is that, but you guys should also know that part of it is because people have a tendency to drop in, trickle in slowly, even in a live stream. They trickle in slowly. A lot of people come in the first half hour slowly. That's so part of it is so that we wait for everybody and build up the audience. At least that we have 2-3 dozen people instead of just 5 or 10, so everybody sort of is already here when we get into the crux of the matters, so there you go. And all the way from Australia, g'day to you, David. Thank you for dropping in, and g'day, Greg, as well, of course.
G'day,
always
David.
You, David. And Pat Bear, all the way from the United Kingdom. Happy to have you here as always as well. Pat Bear, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. And so Greg, I know that you already probably have tales that you want to tell. But if it's cool with you, what I'd like to do is actually start by asking you a pretty simple question.
Ask as many questions as you like.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it. Just really curious because I just figured, since you're going to talk about your time at Topps, and, we mentioned when you were here 5 weeks ago for the show and tell, and, we briefly touched on the fact that you had previously been with IDW, especially during its heyday, Upper Deck, and so you've got a long history in working within hobbies. But what I don't know and would like to know is actually, did the hobby work part of your career? Did that start at Topps, or was there even other hobby stuff pre-Topps?
No, there's quite a bit of hobby stuff pre-Topps. I mean, the big one really, and Milton over at ICV2 did a whole series on this last year during the 50th anniversary of the direct market. I was one of the earliest customers for Seagate, Phil Seuling's direct market company that launched that business, because I'd been going as a kid to the Phil Seuling New York Comic Cons, and he did the big convention back in the 70s when New York was the center of the universe for that sort of thing, and San Diego was just kind of growing. And but he also did a monthly convention, and it was easy to get a table for the monthly convention. My dad was kind enough to bring me in there. And when Phil launched the direct market business, which basically, nobody called it that. It was just, hey, you want to buy some comics, you have to buy 5 minimum, and you're going to get 40% off of retail, which meant you needed a couple of friends. And if you had a couple of friends in, basically, everybody paid cover price, and then you got a couple of extra comics for free.
So let me ask you about that. When they used to say back in those days, and I'm assuming that was what, the late 70s?
Mid 70s.
Mid 70s? Okay.
Well, just do the math. It started in 73. Now, Phil might not have taken any orders for 1973 comic books. It might not have been until 1974, but he announced and launched the business in 73. And my understanding is he had made a deal with Saul Harrison at DC, kind of like they had made a handshake at one of his conventions, but they were all New Yorkers. Everybody was meeting with everybody at the time. Sorry, anyway.
No. That's fine.
You had a question about it, and I kind of went. I rambled on.
No, that's fine. I was curious. back in those early days of the direct market, when they would say, oh, all you need is a minimum of 5, is that to say 5 different titles or 5 copies of each title that you wanted?
5 copies of whatever titles you wanted, and there was a monthly minimum order, but it wasn't a lot. So basically, you could pick and choose. They would send you a photocopied or a mimeograph list, and you'd go, okay, send me 5 copies of Shazam number 12 and Scorpion number 2, and Savage Sword. I remember buying Savage Sword number 1, and for anybody who's interested in this, check Milton's series on the. He did a video series on the history of the direct market. I'm in one. I think Bill Shane is, Paul Levitz. I mean, a lot of good, important people in the hobby. Not including myself in that group. I'm just saying I'm in the group. I'm just saying.
I was just waiting for you to stop talking so I can make a joke about that. Oh my God!
No. But no. I mean, you asked you asked a good question, and so I've been in, I've been in this business or peripheral businesses, 50 years. I mean, there was some time. I mean, I spent 4 years at IBM. I published a baseball magazine, which technically doesn't count. I've done some stuff like that, but I've always, it's always kind of come back in this sort of, entertainment collectibles. I mean, I spent 7 years in video games, but at Activision we did the Spider-Man game, and I remember calling John Romita and seeing if he would do the art for some of the Easter eggs in the Spider-Man game that we did. So, I mean, I sort of like, you're not really in comics, but you are in comics.
Yeah, peripherally, like you say,
Yeah, so CJ's asking a question about it's a ridiculously complex story about how many distributors sort of set up. I think Jeffy may have actually absorbed what was left of Seagate eventually. Phil died. His partner, really, Joni, or Johnny, as she pronounced it, I guess some people say. Just things happened to both the convention and the business when Phil got sick. So, and then there were other people. I see Lee's marking about Fred, which is somebody should devote a whole podcast to that debacle. But in any event, there were some other people who were doing New York cons. It was never the same New York Comic Convention that Phil had done until credit where credit is due, until Fred had a couple of good ones, and then ultimately Reed. There were just these giant gaps for so never rule number 1, never do a February convention in New York because there might be a blizzard. Which actually is a Topps comic. Now that I think about it, it's relevant. It's a Topps comic story. So,
all right. So why don't we fast forward again into the early 90s and maybe start off by letting us know, I guess, and this is another thing that I'm kind of curious about, is how you segued from whatever it was that you were doing right before and got, I don't know if you were pulled in, recruited. It
was a very odd combination. So let me show you how fate converged real quick. Well, it's not quick, but I'll do the best I can.
No, that's okay. We got time.
So Topps Comics launched in 1992.
Right.
They had thought about potentially getting into the comic business anecdotally, apparently, for years. And taking a step back for a minute, if you look at Topps non-sport cards of the primarily the 60s, you see a lot of comic book type people working on Topps trading cards. You see people from the pulps and from animation, but you see guys like Jack Davis and Wally Wood and Bob Powell, and Robert Crumb did a series of cards before he switched fully to really his underground work. Art Spiegelman got his start at Topps. I mean, you see the relationship between comics and cards at Topps really being strong in the 60s. Part of that was Len Brown was one of the creative directors at Topps, and Len really was immersed in the comic book industry. He was good friends with Wally Wood. He was good friends with Roy Thomas. And so there was always this relationship like comic books, but not quite comic books. And then, if you remember, Marvel bought Fleer, the trading card company, and I think that woke some people up at Topps that maybe they need to diversify the business beyond candy and cards a little bit. And I've gotten kind of weird, sort of like, he said, she said stories about what happened. But I did read, they did hire a consultant sometime, I guess, in probably late 91, maybe early 92, but I'm guessing late 91. They did hire a consultant to kind of say, what would it be like if we decide to get into this business? They apparently kicked the tires of somebody. I don't know outside DC Marvel who that would have been, but they looked at somebody maybe potentially purchasing a company, but they were always a little conservative in that. That didn't make sense. But the consultant report suggested that potentially they could get in the business with a little bit of with a little bit of investment. And they had at the time, the guy running sort of that new products division, who ultimately ended up being my boss, Ira Friedman. Ira was a very creative guy, had a lot of publishing experience, and his department he would have been the logical person to kind of get things going. So they made the decision to go forward. They looked at some of the existing licenses they had to see where they could potentially pull from. They looked at some new licenses that they were getting. So the first thing they actually announced, so that may not have been the first thing they actually started working on, but the first thing they announced and did in fact start working on was the Dracula adaptation. Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula was a 1992 movie. Right. They got the trading card and comic book rights for that. I always like to tell people it's probably the only comic book company in history that their best comic book is probably their first one. The adaptation is drawn by Mike Mignola, who is just it's a bridge series between the stuff he was doing at DC and Hellboy. So Mike did the Dracula adaptation for us. There's my page. I like that. That's inks by John Nyberg, who I thought did a really good job. I know Mike really prefers it when he inks his own stuff, but from a deadline standpoint.
Exactly. But I gotta say, like you, I agree with Mike, but this is a fabulously well inked page by John.
Yeah, no, the whole series. It's really gorgeous, and I'll have a little bit more to say about Dracula later on, but I want to make sure we answer this question. But anyway, it really is. It's beautiful. Roy Thomas did a nice work. Coppola loved it. Coppola hired Mignola to do some design work while the movie was in progress, and Mike's credited on the movie. So it's a really cool. It's a really cool story. And again, we did some other great comic books. We did some others that were not so great, but I think for a lot of people this is a favorite. And I've got a terrific Dracula story. Let me finish answering the question of how things converge. So Topps is getting into the business and getting in very slowly and almost like a garage band. I mean, the hiring is very slow. They had approached a few people about potentially being editor-in-chief. Eventually that job went to Jim Salicrup, who came over from Marvel. He had been, at one point he had been the Spider-Man editor when Todd and Eric Larson were sort of reinvigorating Spider-Man. And then ultimately he was working on special projects when he went over to Topps. He was probably, I would say he was probably the first official employee only working on comics, because Ira Friedman and Len Brown were already working on their own stuff, and they just added comics to their portfolio. So Jim was probably the first, getting an editor-in-chief. Jim brought a few other people from Marvel. Again, very lean, mean machine. But they were so busy working on editorial, they were lagging behind in terms of marketing, distribution, management, what I like to remind everyone, the nuts and bolts of this business has to be done. Somebody's got to do it. It's fun to talk about art, and I'm into this, and it's fun to talk about it and collect it and do it. But the nuts and bolts are where you really get, that's going to a lot of times really make or break whether something's working or not. And so I knew Ira's wife from college. he and I knew each other because we'd both been in publishing, but we knew each other kind of casually. And I had actually never made, until probably the year before, I had never made the connection that Ira Friedman is kind of a common name in New York, as is Greg Goldstein, but Ira Friedman's probably more common.
Really?
But the point, yeah, probably. I mean, I went to college with one that was not him, but the funny thing was I had just never connected all the dots that he was the guy at Topps running that business, and vice versa. He didn't quite know. He didn't connect all the dots either. That I had investment in a comic book store, that I had, that I'd done some other collectible stuff. Anyway, the stars aligned, and at a barbecue, this whole thing came up about what they were doing. It was before they announced it, and I told them, I said, look, I'm publishing my own thing right now, but I'm definitely interested in what you guys are doing. And as it turned out, my own thing went away because of the economics of publishing a baseball magazine at the time. And Ira had interviewed a few people that had expressed interest in working there, and it didn't work out. So he came to me, and I sort of came to him, going, "Hey, my magazine is closing. I'm ready for something new." And he's like, "We're having trouble finding the right person. I think he'd be a good fit." So, bam, the stars lined up. Hindsight is, the memories get sweeter in hindsight, but we really had to hit the ground running. I mean, everything was, solicitations were late. I mean, I started in the summer of '92, and the first book is coming out in October '92, and we just had nothing. It was just, it was crazy.
Wow.
I think we had taken out an ad in Diamond I think there's one ad in Diamond Previews that I did not do, that they had remembered to take out in time for the October solicits. And then after that we got everything organized. So yeah, it was good. It was a good the right place at the right time. And I mean, look, a childhood dream. Look, I've been fortunate in my career. I've worked at Topps and Marvel. Where did I spend all my money as an 8-year-old?
Tell everybody what you did at Marvel.
I actually worked on their video game business. So and it was good. We were still getting, this is about 2004, and we were still getting paper checks. And so I have mine with the Spider-Man, the famous Spider-Man.
Oh, really?
I still have my stuff from my first one. Yeah.
That's cool. That's funny.
Cool. I don't know where it is, but I have it.
Likely story. No, I believe you.
That belongs in a frame. Come on. I mean, it really does. I got to work on that.
Tell me, I'm curious about this. So ultimately, it ended up being that first issue by Mignola of the adaptation of the Dracula movie that came out for Topps Comics, right?
Yeah, 4-issue series. So October, November, right. December, January.
Right. And can I assume, given the timing, 1992, the back half of 92, can I assume that the sales were good?
Phenomenal.
Like really, right? Okay.
I mean, like phenomenal. Obviously, ridiculous by today's standards.
Right.
But,
right.
I mean, for a licensed movie adaptation, phenomenal. Close to, call it an average of 200,000 to 250,000 per issue.
Wow. Yeah. No,
we had good. Ira had good connections for mass market distribution, which helped us a little bit less so with Dracula, because the mass market was a little bit more skeptical about Dracula, but it definitely helped us a few months later with Jurassic Park, which those numbers were just ridiculous. They really were.
Okay. Wait, I'd like to get into that if you're
willing. We will. Yeah, I promise.
To unfold. Let me ask you this though, because of how strong the comic book market was at that time. I mean, it hadn't quite peaked yet, but it was close to peaking. In order to get somebody like Mike to do the Dracula adaptation, do you know if he had to be, offered way above what he normally used to get paid?
No, I mean, it was a timing, it was a timing issue. I mean, if you look at what Mike was doing at DC, there were a lot of miniseries. It wasn't like he was on a monthly book. He had
Cosmic Odyssey,
and all the Odyssey, Goth by Gaslight. So it was just basically, hey, Mike, here's another miniseries. Here's another miniseries for you. It just didn't happen to be DC. It happened to be Topps. I mean, and again, he knew one thing Topps had a tremendously positive reputation was they paid everybody on time and quickly. Like it was just sort of, you invoiced and they paid you, and that was the end.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah.
And so there were a lot of startup comic book companies, but Topps was not a startup company. They had been in business 50 years. So they had a very professional way of approaching things in that regard. And so and that's one of the reasons we were able to get freelance talent. We could pay advances, we could pay royalties quickly, we could pay any vouchers quickly. And so, but you make a really great point. I mean, we were October of '92. Obviously, you can't see into the future, but we were 6 months from the biggest month in comic book history, and then the ultimate comic book implosion. So it was coming. It was around the corner.
Right.
Too many publishers and not enough talent.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. Lee asks, Greg, was there an implosion in the trading card hobby at, I guess, referring to Topps, but in the hobby in general, obviously, prior to the comics implosion?
Yeah, Lee and I need to go out for beers because there's a whole other story about that. And that happened very similarly. So it started creeping in the earlier 90s, right? There were just all of a sudden too many trading card players in the business, and it expanded the business. Look, Topps had the monopoly on baseball trading cards for years, and pretty much the other categories as well. And when Fleer and Donruss first came into the market, the entire 80s ended up exploding. I mean, all that competition actually grew the market. Topps business went through the roof along with the new guys. But by the end of the 80s, there were too many new guys. And then Upper Deck came along with at least a sort of innovative product, the upscale trading card. And the thing, and honestly, give those guys all the credit in the world, because when you think of all the other businesses that have been successful by putting out an exclusive sort of upscale product, like using that model in trading cards, and it instantly worked. That started to knock some of the other players' business down a lot. And there were too many late 80s trading cards, period. Too many from Topps, too many from Fleer, too many from Donruss, too many from everybody. And yeah, I mean, it's chicken or egg. Lee's making a good point about speculators versus the volume of product is just, if you're getting orders, you're printing to order. It's just, that's just sort of, you're, and the joke about 87 and 88 Topps was the baseball cards. They never stopped printing them until the new series. This was unheard of. They were still printing them when the new series were about to go to press. And that's the only reason they stopped printing the old ones. That's how the volume was all of a sudden it was a 12-month business. We're still getting orders. We're still getting wholesalers and speculators and guys that are buying uncut sheets and coming up with proprietary ways to cut them so you could have 1,000 Greg Jeffries cards in a box. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Greg Jeffries. Oh my God! New York.
Look at that. Nick's like pulling the ghost out of the closet. Nice job, Nick. That was great. I forgot about Light. Sure.
That's funny.
Oh my God.
Cubby says, still have my 90s sports trading cards that probably have little to no value besides sentimental. Yeah. But that's what it should have always have been. You know what I was doing in the 80s? I was collecting baseball cards. And when I say I was collecting baseball cards, I meant when the cards would come out, I'd go to the next little convention at a little hotel somewhere here in the city. I'd go and I'd buy 2 wax boxes of Topps, go home, open up all the packs, shove that crappy gum into my mouth, spit it out a couple of minutes later, right? And then I'd put all the cards from the 2 wax boxes together in order. And then I'd make a list of the ones I was missing. And from that point forward, I would hit whatever card shops we had in town looking for singles back when they used to be able to sell singles. I truly collected. That's all I did. I didn't care about what it was going to be worth in the future, right? Like, I didn't care. And that was it. And then in '89, Upper Deck comes out, and they start the whole hype train with the their advert. You remember those advertisements? Only 1 out of every 3 collectors will ever be able to get this product or whatever. Like whatever, and that's when it became more of everybody started going to the high tech, high end cards, whatever. And I don't know.
It's a different world. But I'll for this older folk on the podcast tonight, I will tell you that back in the 60s and 70s, the gum was good. And in fact, one of my funniest favorite memories is Donruss got the license for the Monkeys trading cards. And the Monkeys trading cards came with banana flavored yellow gum.
Oh my gosh,
it was just
awesome.
No, the whole I ruined. I tell my kids I ruined my teeth on all the crap I used to put in my mouth. Thank you, Rich, for thank you for that comment. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's good times. It's a very strange, it's a very strange resume I have, being a sort of like, again, like you, Ruben, like being a collector, being a dealer, being a professional / manufacturer, like having my I'm very fortunate that way. I'm very fortunate that way. So absolutely. Can we hold Sean's question for a while? And the answer is
this one that I just posted. Yeah, let me read it out. So there's people that watch, they listen but don't watch because they multitask. So Sean is asking, when Topps closed the comic book business side, were there any pending projects slated for publication that were canceled? Typically, the answer in those cases is yes, but let Greg answer that.
Yes, there could be an entire canceled comics cavalcade, just like DC had. There could be an entire, unfortunately, stuff was returned to creators, some stuff was lost. I had this experience twice. I had this experience at Topps, and then I had this experience, although I was already gone from Topps when the comic book company was canceled outright. But I had the same experience at Acclaim shortly before their bankruptcy. Sort of like there were just tons of things that had never been published, and they are now scattered to the wind. I mean, there were probably half a dozen issues of Quantum and Woody. There were tons of those Classics Illustrated when Acclaim had picked up those rights. Just they're all, as far as I can tell, they're all gone. Because I talked to Dinesh about that at one point, and he didn't get any physical stuff or digital files when they acquired the company. Well, I take that back. They got some files, but very little. So anyway, so yes, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and it wasn't only when the comic book company went out of business, when Topps stopped publishing comics, but as things would get canceled, they were pretty. By the time we got to '94, we were pretty well ahead. We finally had a little bit of a mini staff. We were starting to get sort of, a little bit out in front of things. So when books were canceled, we often had completed books. There's a lot of the stuff related to the Kirbyverse. Those books were canceled, like literally like by an executioner's axe, because they just senior management felt they weren't selling enough, and so the art got returned to the artist, or in some cases, I guess they got lost. I know Keith Giffen got his stuff back, and then Keith's rep, he gave it all to his rep, Spencer Beck, and Spencer sold all that. For years, you could go through Spencer's stuff at a convention or go online, and you'd see tons of these Kirby books that were never published.
Oh, wow.
That Keith had drawn.
Wow. Derek says that he would love to hear more, if you have anything to say on it, about the creative side of the canceled Victory series.
Sure. Before I do that, why don't I give a quick little history of some other top stuff besides that Mignola Dracula, because it'll make more sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
So very quickly, Jim from Salcrep from Marvel came in with a very huge Rolodex, and he had worked at Marvel since he was a teenager, and I don't remember how old he was when he came aboard on Topps, but he had a long experience and was well known for good relationships with one of those guys who had good relationships with the younger creators and the older creators, and so it was a period when fans felt that Marvel hadn't treated Jack right. His independent Pacific Comic stuff, like Silver Star and Captain Victory, didn't quite catch on. It's kind of like a lull. I mean, Jack was obviously still making appearances at conventions, and he was beloved. But as far as anything new coming from him, there wasn't anything. And so Jim and I, shortly before I got there, cooked up the idea of going to Jack and basically saying, hey, any projects that you have in the draw or things that you've thought about, we'd love to have access to. And at the time, Topps paid Jack more than he had ever gotten paid for anything, as far as
really?
I know. Yeah, wow. I mean, certainly in the comic book business.
That's nice.
It was a very big, and I had come on board just as this deal got done, and I immediately named everything we got from Jack. I'm responsible for Kirbyverse. So, which I think, and then everything, then I got carried away. And everything was Kirby. We did Kirby Chrome trading cards and Kirby this and Kirby that. But I don't know. I mean, it's possible Jim and I whipped that Kirbyverse thing up together. But a couple of people over the years have pointed in my direction on that. And in any event, so we had this big launch for April of '93. Just coincidentally, again, the month Turok #1 was coming from Valiant. Some other book, it ended up being too much and just basically created the implosion. So right. I contributed to that. Isn't that? There's a nice legacy. But the idea that Jim came up with was, hey, there are all these older Marvel bullpen guys that are being overlooked because by then the hot young guys had already established themselves in Marvel and gone on and created Image a year earlier. And so, but Marvel was really in that mode of focusing on sort of hot new, let's find the next group of Image guys. Let's find, or guys that look like the next group of Image guys. And so the older guys were kind of getting shunted. They had already been shunted to the side. Now they're being shut. Now it's a second generation of them being shut to the side. So Jim called everyone up and said, hey, we're doing this thing with Jack. Some of these ideas have been sitting in his drawer since the Marvel days. Some of them are a little bit more recent. And he got all this crazy participation. He got Don Heck and Steve Ditko and Dick Ayers and John Sefrin. And he got all these, he got all these wonderful
Marvel Silver Age guys, that weren't getting any work. Yeah.
All the Marvel Silver Age guys were getting very little work or doing commercial work or whatever at the time. And he didn't. I think Jim knew, and I'm testing my 30-year-old memory here. I think Jim knew that wasn't necessarily a recipe for success to do that on a monthly title forever. That you basically, we were still in the 90s and it was different styles, but doing it as kind of a launch product, it was great. And it really was, people really appreciated that to a degree. It was probably ahead of it, honestly, giving Jim some more credit. It was ahead of its time. I think had that happened 10 years later, I think it would have been even more successful because there's always that lag time when you don't really appreciate the guys that are and then all of a sudden they're like, oh my God,
It's like I remember in the early 80s, by the early 80s, which is when I first started collecting and reading comics in '82, and I very quickly learned that, I learned about all the artists. I learned about a lot of things very quickly. I was a sponge, but I learned immediately that classic Silver Age guys like your Kirbys and your Hecks and so on and so forth, they were so out of favor by 1982. Like Don Heck. He wouldn't be given any work, so he had no choice but to go to DC, and they gave him Wonder Woman, for a little while. Kirby, he's so revered today, but in those years from 82, well, honestly, I gotta be honest, 82 throughout the rest of the 80s into the 90s, go to any comic shop and it was unless you were talking about wall books, Silver Age FFs and whatever other comics he had done, nobody wanted in new comics. Nobody wanted.
let me make it. Let me make it even more dramatic, and I may get some slings and arrows from the audience on this, but so be it. The reality is, there's a certain demographic, and I'm in that demographic, that when Jack returned to Marvel, it was not a big, outside of the fact that Jack's coming back to Marvel, it was not as big a deal because people were interested in the next generation of artists. And they were really, if you look at, we'll talk to you about Jim Starlin and Frank Bruner all day long, because those were the modern, lack of a better word, trippy guys, and there was Kaluta and Simonson and Shaken, and I can go on, and you learn eventually, in some cases, fortunately for me, you learn quickly. You can kind of can have the old and the new, but for some people, again, for some, if you look at the commercial success of Jack's books graded on the curve to the other stuff that Marvel was doing, it wasn't like there was this dramatic, like, oh my God, look at what's happening here. That wasn't the case. Right. And so you just had a weird time. And I'm still surprised nowadays. I'm surprised at how well Jack 70s art and how much money it brings in, his Marvel art, because we were like, oh, that's cool, that's Kirby, and he's back at Marvel, but it didn't have the same cachet it once had. Right. And those younger guys, particularly, particularly the guys that were just, they were cooler. And when you saw them at conventions, they had beards and long hair, and they were speaking a different language. And, and that in its own right made it a little harder for some of the older artists who were from a different generation. And this is a completely different story, having nothing to do with Tufts. But I will say, one of the great things that happened at the 1972 New York Comic Con was that Dennis Kitchen, kind of like through him, was when a lot of the underground cartoonists met some of the guys that they idolized, like Kurtzman and Eisner. And Kurtzman and Eisner found out about, that was like literally like when they found out there was this whole different alternative comics movement that they knew nothing about. Right. And that's, again, I think we've gone through this golden age to silver age to bronze age. It's like flavor of the month, flavor of the year, flavor of the decade. Right? Yeah. And I see the comment about Phantom Force and Image. There's a little bit of some weird controversy about that, because we actually, it's Jack, so what are we going to do or say? But the reality is Topps felt that that we had kind of all the Kirby projects, and then all of a sudden Phantom Force came out over at Image. And I'm not sure anyone knows the entire, maybe I probably Lisa Kirby and Eric Larson probably know that story better than anybody, but it was an odd situation that we were competing with another Kirby project at Image of all places. So,
right. Cab wants you to know that this is all very interesting. He's got to leave, but he wants you to know that he was one of the many who supported the he loves Jack. It's his favorite artist.
Thank you, man. I wish, again, Jack passed away while we were working on all this, and of course he hadn't really been drawing very much, and so it had these were Kirby creations and Kirby ideas, which was great, but he wasn't physically able to execute on them, and I always, that's my one regret about those projects, is we had to have other people execute Jack Kirby ideas, and Jack Kirby ideas need to be executed by Jack Kirby. Yeah, absolutely. And Tom has an interesting. He's basically saying what I was trying to say. Right. So he's a retailer. He says, I know when I was selling from 86 to 93, no one wanted anything Kirby. It was only the newer artists. Yeah. Right. And again, my point was that was even happening. It was even happening in the 70s when Jack returned. Look, nobody, okay, I'm going to say nobody. Somebody's going to come in and say, I liked it. But like, honestly, like from a collector's market, you could buy Eternals 1 for a quarter, probably, or whatever cover price was, probably for 10 to 20 years after it came out. It just wasn't, it didn't have that same cachet. He's bringing Dwight, who's the second hire right after Jim. Jim brought Dwight over. So Dwight?
So he said that that he had two projects. One was Shiva Zoo, a mashup of Xena meets Conan in Jurassic Park.
I don't remember that one.
with art by the Spaniard Esteban and Cassandra, a sci-fi story set in the future by Claude Saint-Aubin, and who drew the first issue. Okay.
Yeah. Claude was, we had an A-team at Topps, and the problem was here was a really interesting thing. One of the things, two things happened simultaneously in '93. One is we had the comic book implosion, and most of us thought at the time it would be short-lived, that it would be cyclical. It would come down and come back up again. Didn't happen. At the same time, so many publishers were desperate to increase their lineup that there was a shortage of great talent. Like literally, imagine if Major League Baseball or the NHL expanded by double or triple in 1 year.
Yeah.
You're trying to find the talent, and you can't. And guys are getting...
Yeah. There goes the sport. There goes the sport if they ever tried that, right? Like,
right. But that's what was happening. Guys that had no business doing a monthly comic book were doing a monthly comic book, and it was and it was, and we were competing. Image was offering crazy royalties, just absolutely crazy. So anybody who could get an Image product, an Image project done, went over to Image. That left guys who couldn't get Image projects done. But then, Valiant was paying more than we were, and some other people were paying more than we were. And so you're really, Jim used a lot of charm to get people to do some of these projects for us that would otherwise, and loyalty. And we got a few, certainly we got covers and special projects from people. And, going back to the Kirbyverse launch, we got a short story from Walter Simonson for our Secret City Saga #0, which bought all the other Kirbyverse comic books. We gave you that for free.
Okay. So. Interesting. Nick wants to say that one more thing he wants to add, because he's apparently not at the restaurant yet, or at least not getting served. While the hobby
not getting served, I think is what's happening.
While the hobby was contracting, I should say, Heroes World caused more retailers to shut down than too much product did. Do you agree with that?
I think it's it's kind of interesting. I think it's the pre-Marvel version of Heroes World caused some problems in the Northeast specifically, and then of course the Marvel version of Heroes World caused problems everywhere. Yeah, Nick and I are on the same page. Somehow he's younger than me, but he's been around like as long as me. I don't understand that at all.
That's what happens when you get into wheeling and dealing comics when you're like 13 years old,
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Get a head start.
Anyway, so so getting back to, that's interesting that Dwight mentioned those. I mean, there definitely were a lot of weird canceled issues. There's a Mike Mayhew, who's obviously was one of the rookies that we brought on and did some and has had a terrific career since. Mike had probably drawn about 5 or 6 issues of Zorro that never saw the light of day. And I was always, wow. I guess he didn't have the art or didn't have the scans. I was always hoping, actually, when Nick had the Zorro license, I was always hoping that material would see the light of day. Mm-hmm. Sean Clancy asks again about the top. No, we were not the first comic publisher to seal a comic book in a poly bag. I think that was at X-Force.
But poly bag with a card as well. Would that?
Yeah, but wasn't that? Didn't Marvel do that with X-Force 1?
Oh, X-Force did have a card in it, didn't they? Yeah.
But we were the first people to try it with. We were the first people to try it with everybody. We did every comic book for like a year to 2 years. Came with a trading card, and the stress of getting all that manufacturing and the approvals and getting that all done. And again, I know I mentioned 5 or 6 weeks ago, whenever I was on, I talked briefly about Gabe Soro, who was our printer, the printer for most of the industry up at Quebecor. Gabe was he was always ahead of the curve in trying to make these things happen from an opportunistic standpoint. And he was terrific. He made, I honestly don't know how we got that done. If you took the learning, I mean, that was in the early 90s. And if you said to me 10 years ago, could you guys do, 12 monthly comics, 8 monthly comics with trading cards in them at IDW, I would have looked at you like at 6 heads. I'm like, how would I made that possible? So
Greg, look at Nick's comment on the
I
screen.
know, but I don't think you did the unpublished. At least the last time I asked Mike about it, I don't think you did the unpublished story.
Oh, I see. You're talking about the stuff that never saw the light of day at
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So
okay.
Yes,
but that's interesting, because if he really had completed so much more publishable stuff, it would be available, wouldn't it? Like, why wouldn't? Why wouldn't?
Because stuff gets the problem is I don't think people realize, it's just stuff gets lost. So Mike got his check. Mike got his check for the art. I don't know if it was all returned. This is about, I would say 7 or 8 years ago, he and I were shooting the shit at a convention, and we were talking about this, and I don't remember what the story was, but it's possible he never got all of the art back, or he got it and he sold it. There's a lot of stuff like that just happens. Again, I use the example of having lived through this twice, also at Acclaim, kind of cleaning up a little bit of some of their stuff at the end, because I actually went to Acclaim to work on the video game side of the business, but because of my comic book background, I ended up doing a little bit there as well on that side. And by then they were pretty much they were only doing some special one-shots and stuff. But the point is, stuff just gets, if all of a sudden you have no staff, if there's no Jim and there's no Dwight and all of a sudden stuff just gets lost and people forget to return things, and it's problematic.
Yeah.
Fortunately everybody got paid. I do know that. And I wasn't there at the end. I was not there at the end of the comic book business. I had segued exclusively working on trading cards, which also had a giant creative component because of all the comic art sets that we were doing for things like Star Wars and Vampirella and things like that. So
I remember that, Nick. Malibu shot a gun through comics with a real bullet hole. Protectors #5. I remember that. It's so ridiculous, the things that they were doing. But Nick also claims that he did. I guess he's saying we did, referring to the unpublished stuff. He says Zorro Matanzas. What does that mean? Is that what it was called? What is that?
I don't know. There were a couple of miniseries, and Mike did some of them that were canceled, and there were some other ones. I will say this, and I may not be, and I defer to Nick, but I will tell everybody on this podcast, if there's Mike Mayhew Zorro out there that you can buy from Dynamite directly, or from a comic book store, or from, dare I say it, Amazon, buy it, because Mike's work is really good. I mean, I really, it's obvious. I mean, you looked at this kid walked in, I think he lived in Brooklyn at the time, and he walked in with his samples, and you knew right away he was going to be a special talent.
Yeah.
Like I said, Nick's closer to it, because those books probably got published in the last 10 years as opposed to the 90s.
Yeah, that's right. Just really quick, off the top of your head, do you remember George Pérez doing a cover for Zorro?
Do I remember one? No.
Okay, Sean is asking that. So
I know Zorro Zero launched with Frank Miller cover, which is in a really weird size, and I could have bought that original 10 years ago from Mitch, and I hesitated, and there was a time I was buying a lot of stuff based on comics that I published. I should have bought that Miller Zorro cover. It's a very odd size.
Well, Sean, all I can say is Google it. Just type in Zorro Pérez cover, and if he did one, it'll show up.
Nick is pointing out that Mike sent sent him a page. Mike's a good guy, and I really I'm glad he did that.
Oh, look at that! Nick's coming in. Zorro #8 was Pérez.
All right. Okay.
There you go, Sean. You got your answer.
So tonight's trivia contest at IDW, I believe we only published one piece of art by George Pérez.
Oh.
And it's a cover. That's the only tip I'm going to give away. Let's see if anybody pops up with a chat and tells me who that George Pérez, what book that George Pérez cover was.
The one he did?
The one he did I think it's the only George Pérez art we did at IDW. We could never nail George down.
Somebody's definitely going to get that, because all it takes is a quick Google search, and that's all.
All right. Well, Tom Derenick for Look, I like Tom's stuff. I don't, again, because I transitioned out of the comic line, there were some comics that I am not entirely familiar with. And if you say Tom worked on some of that stuff, it's entirely possible. I will tell you one young guy that became famous that we brought on from, he had done some work for Marvel UK, but not a lot. And then he did X-Files for us, is Charlie Adlard.
Okay. So I was hoping we would bring up the X-Files thing, because I wanted to ask you also, is it fair to say at the time that the X-Files comic was coming out, that was hitting right at the right moment, and that sold gangbusters as well?
Yes.
Would you say it sold better than the Dracula adaptation that Mignola did?
Well, so because of all the different formats that you could publish these things in, it's and different markets, it's kind of hard to say. And again, one thing that Topps was never good at was sort of like long-term record keeping on micro projects. On macro, they had very good information. On some of the micro individual product lines and things that we didn't have. X-Files did it was gangbusters. When that show came on the air, I remember Len Brown walking into maybe the first episode, at the most 2 episodes it aired. And Len Brown walked into the office and said, "This is in our wheelhouse. We need this license and we need it immediately." And it was really funny. We pestered the living daylights out of Fox on everything, cards and comics, and it was chaos, and there was a lot of tension. Some people almost got fired over it on our end because of we had deadlines, and there were a lot of heated phone calls with Fox. Chris Carter was giving Fox shit, and they had to take it from Chris Carter, but they certainly did not have to take it from Topps. And there were some real dramatic, temper-laden phone calls. You don't forget those. So,
interesting. Sean is saying that Dwight Zimmerman told him in his interview with him that X-Files was the best-selling comic.
I'm not going to deny that it was entirely impossible. Remember, it was an ongoing monthly, whereas a Dracula or Jurassic Park Jurassic turned into a lot of miniseries later. But it's hard to figure out what's the best in the aggregate. Maybe the X-Files license in total sold better. I don't know. I also know that Dwight wouldn't necessarily be the one looking at all the sales figures. So it's hard. I certainly, it blew up, and there were a lot of special market versions of X-Files. So It's entirely possible that in the aggregate, X-Files did sell better than anything. I will look, the Kirbyverse books, just the one-shots together sold 1 million comic books. Let me just check that number. The four plus the special edition, which was technically the free, so you can't say you sold a free book, but we shipped 1 million Kirby comics in April of 1993.
Wow.
So and Jim Salicrup told me that some of those Marvel creators, the Don Hex and those guys, got the biggest royalty checks in their lives by far. I think it's either Don or one of the guys got a royalty check that was bigger than all his royalties combined in his lifetime, because the older Silver Age guys didn't get royalties.
Who said that, Greg?
It was either Don Heck or it was Dick Ayers. It was.
Really?
Yeah, because think about it. The Silver Age guys, royalties only came into effect in the 70s.
Oh, that's true.
So
yeah.
Some of the Silver Age guys were ready. I mean, how much work did Dick Ayers do from 1975 onward?
Right.
I mean, and if he did Sergeant Fury or some Westerns, and I'm not, my brain, but he wasn't doing a best-selling book where he necessarily would have gotten a great check, basically.
Right.
Marcus loves those Miran. Yeah, she's great. I love her. She always was like, she always acted like she was the happiest person in the world to see me, and I always appreciated that. That was those covers, those X-Files covers were great. She had a very unique style about her. So
Sean
yeah, I mean, I'll let you.
It's a fun little tidbit, though, right? Like that Dwight says, "Oh, by the way, the actors didn't like the way that they were drawn inside the comics."
Nobody does. No actor has ever. Every actor thinks they look better than their likeness, and that's fair. I understand that. It's they're actors. Many of them are vain. Many of them are out of control. But the reality is, it's rare that somebody comes up to me at a show and goes, "Man, you really drew me really great." I mean, obviously I didn't draw it personally, but whoever the artist was, like they're always issues. The idea is to keep them on model. Or make them look better.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
If they're a character actor and somehow all of a sudden they look like Harrison Ford, you're like, oh, okay, nobody's going to complain about that. So.
No, yeah, of course. Listen, Marcus. So the Marcus is saying that the Charlie Adlard interiors were kind of crude. Don't forget how early in his career it was as well. So he's still just kind of getting his feet wet, learning.
I'm probably and. I like Charlie personally. I own a X-Files page that I think is as good as anything he did on Walking Dead.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No zombies, huh?
Yeah. And you think about this too. Interesting, since we're talking about how well certain comics were selling at the time and whatnot. It's an interesting little sort of thing to think about, that in the 2000s into the 2010s. When the Walking Dead comic was, really exploding and becoming more and more popular, selling gazillions of copies, plus the trade paperbacks were selling gazillions of copies every month. So people started talking about how, wow, like Charlie Adlard, like, wow, like he has made a fortune because of this one comic, right? And it's true, and not to mention the original artwork sales. But what people fail to realize is that supposedly, at least for a little while, when the before the market implosion happened, X-Files was enough of a we can all debate how well did it really sell. I don't know the copies, but it sold well enough that he had already made a small fortune back in the early 90s just from the royalties as the X-Files artist.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, again, everybody's got a different definition of what a small fortune for him. $200,000. It might have been $2 million. Who knows? But yes, look, X-Files. I know those early issues. They were reprinted. There were special editions. We did a couple of direct deals. We might have even been on one of the home shopping networks, and I don't know. And see, Nick probably sold some for us for all I remember back in the day. There we go. We got the George Perez winner.
Oh,
somebody use their Google well. Star Trek Planet of the Apes crossover. One issue has a George Perez cover.
That's the one?
Yeah.
Star Trek crossover with Planet of the Apes. Wow, George got George to do it. Wow. That's crazy. Hey, Matt Kennedy in the house. What's up, Matt? Another Vegas boy sweating it out. Got a great. Sorry, is it Miran?
Yeah, Miran.
It's Miran. Miran Kim painting for a Stephen King It comic that never happened. Oh, okay. Who was it supposed to be published by, though?
Was that one of ours? I don't remember it. Again, I missed the last year and a half of comics and canceled projects and what have you. I missed most of those because I was ready full time on trading card.
No, this is another funny little tidbit, right? Sarah Michelle Gellar drove artists crazy when it came to her nose. She was never happy how they did her nose.
She was always the only person when I did Buffy trading cards and ink work. She was the only person who wouldn't sign. She wouldn't do autographs. She was the only one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
did you ever say why though?
No, not really.
Just one of those things, right?
I might.
Does anybody remember when
I do.
a Harbinger Zero with the trade paperback, and retailers bought tons of copies and then sold the Zero as a premium and didn't care about the trade paperback sales?
There you go.
That is so crazy. Oh, the things that used to happen back in those days, Though he did not work at Topps, he was a Dynamic Forces guy. What were the tense X-Files calls with Fox about, says Peter?
Trying to get approvals. Again, comics are supposed to be monthly periodicals, trading cards, getting photos and getting likenesses approved. And The problem with a show like X-Files is, and obviously the world's gone streaming and we really don't have network television, but until 10 years ago, the problem with these niche shows is that the studios are never ready for them. They're never ready for licensing. They're never, same problem with Buffy, by the way, with Fox also, deja vu. They're never ready, and Angel and all these other stuff that was, that came out of the Whedonverse. They're just not ready for these things. They're focused on the big summer movies. They're focused on the perennials like Simpsons. And when these things come around, they're not staffed. They're not ready to deal with sort of the, they're not ready for success. And so it was just crazy times because they felt they had a limited staff dealing with all our requests. I think we did an X-Files magazine too. So we did, the comics and the magazine and the trading cards and just deadlines and getting things approved. And they were really nervous. The show took off. It didn't completely take off. I mean, its biggest success was season 3. But they were nervous. Now all of a sudden they had Chris Carter, who I think self-admittedly was out of control in that iteration. When we worked with Chris and we brought X-Files back at IDW, it was a different version of Chris Carter than we had worked with at Topps.
Oh, okay.
So, and it was a much simpler. The whole process was much simpler than it had been when it was just chaos. And I mean, I mean, there were 2 people that Fox wanted either fired or definitely taken off X-Files for at least a minute, and I was one of them. So.
Oh yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
Matt wants to know, was Guy Nutter tough on approvals?
Guy Nutter, help me out.
I don't know. I don't know what he's getting at.
I don't know. Nutty Guy? Guy Nut? I don't know. I don't know where we're going with that.
It's definitely going over my head.
That's not ringing a bell. So
no.
I'm not gonna. Allison. She was we had Allison at Comic-Con a couple of times. She was great.
Oh, she's good. Yeah. She always seems like she would be a sweetheart in real life and in person. Yeah. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it, everybody. Yeah. Thank you. If you haven't done so, please hit the thumbs up down here somewhere. Would appreciate it. Thank you so much. And all right, have a great dinner, Nick. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
And Nick, I'll live vicariously through your dinner because I'm hungry.
We only got an hour to go, everybody. Just so you know, I forgot to mention at the top of the hour, we got a hard stop of 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern. Everybody, Greg needs to go and fill his belly, I suppose. So just to let you know, so get your questions in, whatever you want to ask, as quickly as possible, so we can get as much.
And while we're waiting on some questions, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Kirbyverse and the implosion that came after, because somebody asked earlier about Captain Victory.
Before you get to it, sorry to interrupt, Greg. Before you get into it, just because this is a small little thing, Matt's clarifying that he meant David Nutter at Fox.
I still don't know who that is. No, I can tell you. I remember. I became friend. The irony of all this is I became friends with a lot of those people at Fox after everybody calmed down. So I remember some of the. I mean, and I would never. I mean, there's one woman in particular who became very close friend of mine who was a thorn in my side. Actually, there were 2 now that I think about it. And there were 3 people primarily we worked with, and none of them were this guy. I did not work on the Batman '89 movie magazine, but I did work on Batman Returns. And the joke at Topps about Batman Returns was it kept on returning because the merchandise for Batman Returns, there was too much of it, and it was a disconnect between the movie, which was a little bit more weird and adult than the first. I mean, the first movie is adult, but the second movie is just weird. When you watch the 2 of them back to back, you just realize he got a little weirder on Batman Returns. And the merch people at McDonald's basically wanted to ban Warner Brothers after the Happy Meal. They were like,
really?
After they saw the movie, it was a disaster. That was like, I mean, again, Topps is one player in a sea of players, and you don't mess with McDonald's. And I don't know when the next Warner project to get into a Happy Meal was, but those guys, but McDonald's was anything but happy.
Oh, that's funny.
I was on a conference call about that, and yeah. So anyway, so I worked on the Batman Returns a little bit, but then Batman Forever, all that publishing stuff was my baby. The magazine, poster magazine, stuff like that, and that did better. We kept our expectations lower, and we did much better profit-wise on those.
Cool. All right. So, yeah, sorry, after my interruption, Greg.
No, that's right.
Let us cycle back to the whole Kirby thing so that, don't forget, Derek, if you're still watching, I haven't forgotten this.
Yeah, no,
we'll get back around to that.
So let's take a quick look at the history of these Kirbyverse and the Kirby relationship. So the books came out. We did, here's an old word that doesn't get enough use anymore. The books did gangbusters, we were launching. So we basically took some of these unpublished concepts that Jack had, the Secret City, and these characters, Captain Glory and Bombast and Night Glider, and they were just drawings that had sat around. Jack, I believe, potentially created them while he was on as a work for hire for one of the companies, but he just kind of kept it to himself. And because these books, the Captain Victory and the Silver Star, had been canceled at Pacific, he never got a chance to expand into some of these other characters. So our goal was to kind of do that. Again, the missing ingredient from a Jack Kirby line was Jack Kirby, and that ultimately ended up being despite the love and affection people had that we did Ditko one shot, and we did the Eris and Severin, and we did the Heck. I think the reality was there was no way to make a new series without kind of like Image creators. There was really no way to make that sort of thing work,
right?
Without Jack, and unfortunately, he passed in February of '94. So, I mean, we barely had any time. He loved what we were doing. He was so gracious. God, the man was so gracious. What a gentleman. I mean, honestly, and Roz loved me and vice versa. Her maiden name was Goldstein, so she thought I was the best just because.
Of course.
We were related somehow. But anyway, he was just so great. I think even if Jack hadn't liked some of the things that we were doing, he would have been a cheerleader for us no matter what. But again, the market had, as far as superheroes went, the market was full of Marvel and DC, and then Image and Valiant, and just had very little use for what we were doing. So the implosion came for the Kirbyverse all too quickly. Matter of fact, one of the things we had been brainstorming was a Mars Attacks Kirbyverse crossover, because we had started launching our Mars Attacks comic. What was funny about that is it actually resulted in a better project, which was Mars Attacks the Image universe, which came out a little bit later on. Mm-hmm. So because there was no more nobody wanted to support the Kirbyverse anymore at that point. Right. So canceled books. So this is testing my memory. I mentioned earlier, Keith Giffen was way ahead on the Victory series. So I think the only book that came out was number 1, maybe number 2. Well, I think maybe only number 1. And
you mean for Victory?
Yeah. For
Victory, only 1?
Yeah, I think so. I could be, okay. But Keith was well ahead. So there were some finished, probably issues 2 and 3 were finished, and 4 and 5 were like works in progress. There was the Silver Star book was going to be by James Fry, and he finished pages that I'm pretty sure he finished entire issues that never came out. I owned a page from one of those canceled issues for a while. And again, I'm sure Jim probably, if he kept his notebook, I mean, if you looked at sort of like, okay, there were going to be these separate titles, and then they would come back together again, maybe the following summer, or maybe wait another year and kind of have another big crossover event. I mean, there were a lot of approved plans internally, as well as with Jack. It all went out the window. And unfortunately, I hate picking on one title or one thing, but honestly, one of the worst books that we did at Topps period was the Orphan, which was Satan 6. The one shot was fine when we put it out, but the ongoing Satan 6 book was just a mess.
And in what way do you mean that it was a mess?
Story art, it was a mess.
Oh,
it was just
okay.
It was just a mess. But it was a nice. I mean, it was fun that, you know, I think we all want in high concept. We all wanted it to work because, you know, it was Jack. You know, how much horror had Jack ever done? The Demon was just kind of like sort of an under. I think at the time, nowadays it's not. It's really hard to buy Demon original art, but Demon was kind of a little underappreciated back in its day at DC, and we were just excited to be kind of again working on a Kirby horror project. But not only were we not working with Jack, that just some of the talent that happened to be on that book was it wasn't ready for prime time.
Oh, okay. So more about not being ready for prime time. I thought you were leaning towards saying about the type of people who weren't reliable enough to hit deadlines, and so it screwed everything up.
No, it might have been. I mean, when I say not ready for prime time, there's a lot. You know, you have great artists who can do one book a year. Well, that I can't put them on a monthly book.
Right.
Then you have guys that can do monthly books that shouldn't be drawing. I mean, you have a kind of like you have a gamut, and you know, I know we have a lot of art collectors online, you know, for this. So, you know, we've all seen the originals. You go, wow, it's great art. Oh yeah, it took the guy a year to finish that.
Yeah.
that book. And then you go, oh, that's really bad art. Yeah, but he could do it quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you can. What's the old designer's joke? You can have two of the following three. You can have it quality, quick, or cheap. You can pick any two of those.
Yeah. Which one do you want?
which two do you want? Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
wow. But the from the Kirby stuff, what was the longest amount of issues any of the series went? Do you remember?
No, it might have been honestly because Satan 6 existed in its own bubble and wasn't like I don't think we kind of like we purposely kind of pushed it out of the Kirbyverse because it really didn't belong with these other superhero characters. So it's possible, you know, we might have done more issues of that. Somebody in top senior management, it might have been the chairman, Arthur Shore, who's a very talented guy and a ridiculously smart guy and successful. It might have been Arthur himself who was just sort of like, no, just get rid of these books. I don't. Yeah. Honestly, it's probably unfair for me to speculate but I have it was a quick, you know, we don't care how many are completed, just sort of stop sending them to production, basically.
Right.
Nowadays, it's funny because I don't remember who in finance, if anyone, was doing sunk cost analysis because it's still inconceivable to me that you wouldn't that if a book is paid for, penciled, inked and written, that you wouldn't finish putting it out. But I know DC had the similar strategy with some other books as well. So and then there's a whole issue of, you know, of course, if you keep a book in inventory and don't put it out, it stays on the books as an asset. And right. And you don't, you know, so you have an asset in inventory as opposed to a potential loss.
So, right. Yeah, exactly. You, by the way, have a piece of Kirby Topps art in your collection that I can show. And
actually drawn by Jack. I'm intrigued.
Wasn't it? I grabbed it quickly, and maybe I should have read what the heck it was. I just grabbed it. I don't know.
It's anything. Oh, no, I don't still, because I had a Satan 6 piece, which is some of those pages are penciled by Jack, but I don't think I still. Okay, what? Come on, let's take a look and figure out what it is.
Hold on a second. Let me see where. Hold on, everybody. Hold on.
I'm really intrigued.
Let me see. Yeah, here it is. It is, in fact, a Satan 6 page. Let's take a look at it, everyone.
It's production art. That original. So I have the product. That original has kicked around the hobby a little bit.
Oh.
I would buy it for a reasonable price. If any, I think the last time I saw a dealer had it, I think it was Bashara. I can't swear to it, but or maybe it came up at auction. But yes, I would buy one of the Kirby sets, but I would not pay the same that I would for a Marvel Eternals, and I think that's what the problem was with the pricing the last time I looked at it.
Oh, I see.
But so it's production. So it is production art, and I had two, but they're from Jack's Files. I had two. I had the cover, which we ended up not using. I think the cover had Royer inks and Jack's Files, and we ended up using, I think McFarlane actually inked the actual one, and then we had. Is this Royer or Terry Austin? I think it's Royer.
If it is, it doesn't really look like it.
Well, then maybe it's Terry Austin possibly on this one.
Yeah.
But I just happened to come across these production flats from, I guess one of the family members had just opened up sort of a locker of stuff and sold it. So,
right. Sean, just wanted to say to Sean that you didn't actually almost forget that we were showing art tonight. We're not technically showing art tonight. It's not a show and tell. I literally only uploaded like 4 pieces because Greg happens to have these pieces in his collection from his Topps years. So that's all there is tonight. So it's technically no art showing. I just have, like I said, 4 pieces, and I've already shown I think 3 of them or 2 or 3 of them. So there you go. And Dan says that's a nice page. Now, I also have a couple of questions, so you guys just wait with your questions. We don't want to hit them without missing them. I've got to hit them in order. And Sean asked, and sorry, before I get to that, let me first remove this from the screen. There we go.
Oh, that's better.
Yeah, there we go. And so Sean was asking, any license agreement that you went for but couldn't close a deal on while you were at Topps?
Always. I mean,
I assume there'd be many.
You know, there's always, you know, you go after the most popular things, and you have good competition from some of the, some of the big two couldn't decide whether they were in licensing or out of licensing for much of the period that Topps was in business, and so sometimes we were competing with Marvel and DC for things, and then you had these smaller companies. I mean, I think Malibu had Star Trek for a while, and I mean, it's a competitive space. There's nothing that stands out particularly. We had a thing called Star Wars Galaxy Magazine, which was a Star Wars magazine for consumers as opposed to theoretically just hardcore collectors. It was a project that I launched again with Ira and some of the other people that were there. I can't remember who the editor of it was, but we asked Lucasfilm if we could do a Star Wars mini comic in there, and they said go to Dark Horse. Dark Horse said we're too busy doing our own comics. You guys do it. So we actually did comic book stories in a couple of the issues of the magazine, and then Dark Horse complained and said Topps is doing comic book stories, and we're like, okay, this is like now a circular firing squad. We're all like, there was always like, okay, wait a minute. We said to you guys, you do it. We'll pay you to do it. Oh, we're too busy to do it. Well, then let us do it. No, we don't want you to do it. Okay. Well, there were some weird, there were always some weird things like that. And I'm sure there were some new projects that we didn't get. There were some things that never came to fruition, period. Actually, we did chase Beavis and Butthead very aggressively. I think we lost out to Marvel Fleer on that. Guys probably know. I don't know if Marvel put, it sounds about right. Being in New York, and Howard Stern was at his peak of his radio popularity. He did a gimmick called Fart Man, and we wanted to do Fart Man comics. And
oh my god,
he didn't want to do licensing. Thank God. I mean, I was just embarrassed by this whole idea. So that never. I mean,
you talk about throwing anything on the wall just to see if it sticks. I mean, Fart Man, because based on a shock jocks skit that he does.
But you see, that's the kind of thing. That was what was just sort of weird about Topps and weird about the call. I think we could have probably, if we had just thought of it as kind of a limited opportunity, I think we would have sold it. And here's the thing. A lot of projects that should have been like one-shots or a miniseries were always envisioned as being something bigger. And that was, at the time, in the comic book industry, that was a problem. Just get something out, be done with it, and move on to the next thing should have been, the philosophy. But it made me think, just when I thought of Fartman, there was something else I thought of that we did get that was a little bit more legit than that, that we chased after. And maybe it'll come to me. But yeah, there were a bunch of, there certainly were, there are always things you wish you could do and you can't do them.
Yeah.
And there are things, I know what it was. What I was going to reference is, you have to be a hardcore Topps fan to know that we published one issue of Goldeneye, James Bond. We wanted to do James Bond comic books desperately. We all thought we put out Goldeneye #1.
Oh.
And I cannot make this up. And I became friendly with some of these people later on, but the people at Eon Productions and Dan Jack, the licensing arm, wouldn't approve issue 2 because it had a cover and had some art inside that was too close to what's her name? She was an X-Men, the villainess in Goldeneye. Bumpy Johnson or whatever her, yes, a tall brunette.
Famke Johnson.
Yeah. She was the villainess, and we had some sexy scenes with her that were based on the movie, and they were like, you can't put that in the comic book. And everyone erupted. Yeah.
Why?
Because it was a comic book. Because it was a comic book.
But you can draw it in a way so that it's not going to be pornographic. I mean,
it's not. James Bond is not pornographic. It's sexy.
No, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
So everyone erupted. Everyone was like, "Are you kidding me? Where you have to like tame a James Bond? Like, we're not trying to make it sexy here. We're just."
But who put the kibosh on that?
The James Bond people, Eon Productions,
James Bond people.
Yeah. Hey, the same thing happened. The same thing happened to me. The same thing happened to me at True Blood at IDW. Deja vu all over again. This is too sexy.
The very people who come up with the names Pussy Galore, are the ones telling you, "Hey, you can't put that sexy scene in your comic book." Right. What?
Correct. What? And her character's name in Goldeneye is on the top or something, or something like that. On the top.
Something on the top or whatever. Yeah.
This was my life, dude. This is what. That's what I had. Yeah.
That is so funny. Oh my gosh.
This is what I mean. No, it's just, so you can find it online. There's so I think Brian Stelfree's might have done all 3 covers, and I think you can find the covers for 2 and 3 online. It's another piece of art I would buy. Would be the cover 2, and again, the issue never came out. It was not only that we were fighting with them over approvals. It's just, again, it's a periodical business. You can't put a Goldeneye comic book out 6 months after Goldeneye comes out. The only people that ever got away with that on any license happened to be Goldeneye, and that was that video game from for the N64, which sold years after the film came out. But that's not the way the comic book or the movie magazine did. And Topps, again, I think Topps kind of going into this business on a little bit of a garage band level. I think some of the expectations of things going smoothly compared to trading cards were probably unrealistic, because the reality was, whereas we were not using approved stills, we had to have artists draw things. And yes, some people didn't like their likeness and some people didn't like the way the material was presented. And you're fighting deadlines. I mean, Marvel can't get out a Hulk book on time, and nobody's got to approve the Hulk's likeness, except the editor of the book's got to go, it looks like the Hulk.
Yeah.
But we're sitting there, and and you're submitting, basically you're submitting all these comics through a bureaucratic approval chain, and it's very hard. And that's honestly, I'm going to give a pat on the back to my colleagues, particularly at IDW, where we had so many licensed comics, and we're working with so many intractable and difficult. Well, intractable is a more dramatic word than difficult. I mean, just people who are just very difficult to work with. The fact that we got books out when we said we were soliciting them, was really credit to all the creative people that worked really hard to make that happen. Yes, Sean, I know Dark Horse did do James Bond comics in the 80s. I own one of the Paul Gulacy pages, but one of the stipulations from those James Bond comics, they could not have any likenesses of any of the movie actors. And I believe Nick is under the same stipulation at Dynamic Forces to not, like, they're James Bond comics, but you can't use likenesses of any of the actors, or because you're licensing the Bond character from Ian Fleming properties. Yeah,
right. That's already one license, just the character itself, the fictional character, right? It's a whole other thing to now you want to get the likeness of an actor. It's a whole different.
Yeah, and that was a whole. And again, they had never done that. There's a whole, it's there's a whole to do. There's some nice articles online about James Bond in comic books. Showcase like number 50 something is a reprint of a Dr. No adaptation done in the UK. Right. Yeah. It's crazy. It's funny. I own most of the good Silver Age books. I never actually owned that one. I don't know why.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Marcus says that he thought Topps did a lot of photo covers.
I wouldn't say we did a lot. We definitely did some, and we did variants. So sometimes the direct market would have one cover, and then I think X-Files. We might have used Miran Kim on the direct market, and then photo covers on the mass market. But we didn't do a lot, say the way we did a lot at IDW, where we purposely did, whenever we did TV at IDW, we tried to do one photo cover and one art cover. It wasn't always, we weren't always able to do it.
Right.
It's true.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So I'm curious if you have any stories about relating more particularly to, back in those days, it wasn't so much an established hobby as it became after the internet came into being. But in terms of original art in any way,
Oh, sure. Yeah, I got all. Can I go get a box of tissues first so I can cry a lot when I tell you some art stories?
Absolutely.
Because honestly, so I'll tell you a couple of funny stories. I said I had some more Dracula stuff to talk about. I also had some Jurassic Park stuff. So on Dracula, the person who could check me on the price on the covers, I'll ask the next time I see him. But Mike offered pages from Dracula to anyone who wanted them for $50 at the time. That was a fair price for a current piece of art from a movie adaptation of all things.
Yeah.
I was not I think I talked about this in the art show. I was not collecting art at the time. And so I didn't do it. Don Heck gave some pages to people who worked on the book. He was very generous. Very few times does a publisher or somebody in operations or administration get a gift. Don gave me a beautiful page, which unfortunately got lost in a move. And I actually think what happened was it got sold in a group of other stuff when it wasn't supposed to be sold. So someday I'll actually dig around and try and find that page. I think George and Gil Kane divided Jurassic Park, so that maybe Gil got 2 issues back, George got 1, and maybe they split an issue to kind of equal out the pencil and inks.
Right.
And honestly, it's weird the way Jurassic Park breaks up and the way the approvals were working with us. All the really great dino action happens at the end of issue 3 and throughout issue 4.
And 4, yeah.
Issue 1 and 2 are kind of a little quiet. But yeah, no, it was obviously these guys were often. It was Jim ran the business in Brooklyn, and then we ultimately moved to Manhattan. But it was kind of like a little mini Marvel in terms of, he liked when the creators came in. He liked taking them out for lunch or just hanging out, and it was great for me because I got to meet a lot of people I'd never. I had never met. My favorite story from that time is, so Arthur Shore, the chairman of Topsail I referenced earlier, had a driver. Because Arthur he didn't drive, or maybe he did drive, but he didn't want to drive. So he had a car always at the facility and had a driver. And Roy Thomas was making a rare trip into New York. And like I said, Len Brown and Roy were good friends. So Len, Roy, Jim, and I somehow convinced Arthur to lend us the car with the driver. And we went out to Nathan's Original in Coney Island to have hot dogs. Because Roy really wanted to have hot dogs while he was in town. It was great.
That's funny.
By the way, quick trivia, not directly related. I just posted a couple of my Planet of the Apes pages on my own blog last month. And in doing some research, I learned that the reason Marvel got the Planet of the Apes license was that Len Brown kept nagging his pal Roy Thomas. He's like, you got to get the Apes license. It's going to do really well for you guys. And it was actually Roy wrote a whole story about that in the first issue of the Planet of the Apes magazine, which is great. It was like that. I completely ran into that by accident, which is fun.
That's funny.
So I'm trying to remember some other art. You know, I'm sure if somebody just even asked Keith Giffen for a page, I'm sure he would have happily. Given one.
Oh yeah.
You know, Walter, of course, being Walter, who wants all his art back, made sure he got whatever he worked on, he got back.
Sure.
We did the Star Wars Galaxy trading card, 3 series, 400 different comic book artists. Did I talk about Star Wars Galaxy a little bit on the last show?
I mean, if you did just like off the, on the very peripheral.
If you look at the 400 cards that are in the 3 series, a little bit more than 400, you see pretty much every artist you would imagine was alive at the time, including a few that had passed away, but we were still able to get some art. But I didn't talk about my phone conversation with Ellie Frazetta.
Oh,
I feel like I just talked about that recently. So
we spoke about her, but that's okay. Yeah. Say it again.
Yeah, it's just a crazy, to get Frazetta to do a Star Wars painting, we would have had him do the art for the box. We would have had him do whatever he wanted to do. And Ellie was his business manager, and she, I mean, they knew what Star Wars was. I'm sure Frank thought some of it was derivative from some of his sci-fi stuff, and he would have had it's fine. But whatever it was, they wanted to own the copyright on it. And we're like, we don't own the copyright on it. Lucasfilm owns the copyright.
This is what we touched upon. We did touch upon
even if we got that issue solved, she had trouble with the first right of refusal, which was actually the segue I was going to use for the story. So we never got a Frazetta piece, but Lucas had insisted that he have first right of refusal, that the artist could sell the art, but and they could obviously keep it if they wanted to. I think that was pretty much the stipulation was they didn't have to, but if they were going to sell it, they had to offer it to Lucasfilm first. I think that's the way. And there might have been there might have been different contracts. There might have been like some contracts where the artist had to offer it regardless of whether they wanted to keep it or not. And so I'm again 30 years old. I'm not remembering the paperwork.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to, but Lucas bought a ton of Star Wars Galaxy art, and so it's hard to find some nice pieces from that. He didn't buy everything, but he bought a bunch. And there's a piece I have my eye on that another collector has, and I would like to wrestle away, but I don't want to say what it is because I don't want any competition. So,
as a collector, we all understand. Don't worry about that.
So we were working. So I guess my broader point was we were working on these comic art trading card projects, utilizing the same talent. And a lot of people who couldn't do, 20 sequential pages for us, or heaven forbid a monthly book, could do a card for us, or in some cases it was some cases it was a painted card, some cases it was a line art card. It's cool. I love that project. That was a really fun project. We burned through project managers though. It was a difficult project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we definitely burned through some project managers on that.
I can imagine. Hey, I didn't want to forget that about 20 minutes ago, Dan, I hope Dan Evan, you're still here. Dan was asking, I don't think you'd be privy to this, but here, let me just get that, pop that comment, pop it up here. Okay. There it is. So he was saying, what was the most bizarre or funny feedback letter that you may know about for a Topps comic? And he asks because Wikipedia talks about fans being just brutal, going over every detail, but I don't think you were privy to those letters and right?
Like, no, I mean, again, of course, if I had wanted to sit in the office and read letters and not do my work that day, sure,
right.
I could have read letters. I don't know what the Wikipedia reference is. I don't remember. I will say that when you're doing movie adaptations or TV stuff, yeah, sure, the fans complain about things. So Jurassic Park's a perfect example. And I think I said on the last show, Jurassic Park it may not be again, I probably lean towards the Mignola Dracula thing being the best thing we did. So Jurassic would be number 2 in my mind. But it's my favorite thing because I worked on it from start to finish, as opposed to Dracula, where I kind of came in, things were already, the ball was already rolling.
Yeah, I can see how that can make a difference to you. You know?
Jurassic, I worked on comics and cards, and I even helped out in the candy a little bit. Getting some approvals done for some of the molds, and I even have I should have brought them for my show and tell. I even have 2 of the original candy molds. They're like these giant sculpts.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Wow. That's kind of a fun little thing to have held on to.
Yeah, it's just a really weird, I don't know why I held on to it all this time, but I have them.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about Jurassic. I remember just how just a huge deal it was when that first movie came out.
Sure.
And of course, especially for males, the male audience, what male as a little boy doesn't grow up loving dinosaurs, and so I actually would have thought that if anything was the bestseller of all time at Topps Comics, I would have thought it would have been something like Jurassic Park miniseries.
That's why, again, without looking at individual royalty and accounting statements, describing what a bestseller is. Okay, so there were 4 issues of the original adaptation. It was our best-selling newsstand comic book by far, and it had a 40 to 50% sell-through, which is unheard of even in the 90s for periodicals. I mean, it sold hundreds of thousands of copies on the newsstand. It sold hundreds of thousands. So again, I guarantee you that was probably Guild's biggest royalty check at the time. It was certainly, I'm sure, high up on George Perez's list. Walter, it's hard to say because, by then. But again, you're talking about the 90s. A lot of these guys have not seen trade paperback collections. How much stuff had actually been collected by the early 90s? I mean, Marvel Masterworks hardcovers had just started around 1989, 1990.
That's true. That is true, yeah.
So you look at the early royalty check, the way creators make royalties is these books, to your point earlier about Adlard and Walking Dead. I mean, they were just printing, when the TV show came on the air, those compendiums, $60 cover price, they were just printing those like phone books. It was unbelievable. And I got some, friends at Diamond, I got some of those, I got some numbers just thrown at me like, hey, why aren't you guys doing these kinds of numbers with some of your projects? And they were insane. So but again, it was by the time we went from the 90s to the 2000 aughts or the teens, it was a different business model. And so we just, anyway, the point was Jurassic, we only probably put out 4 or 5 projects in trade. Dracula, Jurassic Park, possibly the Lansdale and Truman Lone Ranger series. And John's asking if all dinosaurs were atomically correct as opposed to anatomically correct.
Yeah, anatomically.
It might have been atomically correct. I don't know. No, I mean, listen, I own the cover, and maybe Ruben can multitask and pull it up if it's on CAF. I own the cover of Jurassic Park number 4. And when I wrote about it for my blog, I specifically made fun of the fact that the dinosaur pictured is neither a T-Rex nor a velociraptor. It's a Gilcane dinosaur, a Canesaurus. I don't know what the hell that thing is, but somehow we got it through, and it has patches on it. So it clearly, the first round did not get approved. But there it is. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the dinosaur carefully, you're like, okay, wait a minute. It's too small to be a T-Rex, and it's got some things, but is it? And they're being menaced. If you remember the movie, they're being menaced by the Velociraptor, not the T-Rex.
Yeah, exactly.
And the T-Rex comes and bites spoiler alert for a 30-year-old movie. The T-Rex comes along and bites the Velociraptor. So I to this day, I have no idea. I love the art. I love the angle. I mean, I love, but it's not atomically correct.
Yeah, and you're so right, Greg. I mean, when I saw that, I was like, oh. First of all, I was upset because I was like, well, like you just said, that I was like, that's not who was threatening the kids. What's going on with there? And then I was like, and also, what's up with Gil drawing the typical Gil dinosaur from like Jungle Action in the 70s? You know,
you're right.
Because if you look at those covers where he drew the dinosaur in the Jungle Action,
right.
It's the same one.
It's a Canosaurus.
Yeah, exactly. Canosaurus it is. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. But whatever. It was Kane.
Wait till I tell a couple of people about that one. But you're absolutely right. It's just, it's just, again, this bang trying to get things approved. I mean, we paid Universal a giant advance, and we exceeded the advance, if I remember correctly. And so it was, but you had to get books out the door, and it was. Again, I don't know how we did it. I don't know how we bagged them with trading cards. I don't know any of that. It's like it seems miraculous to me today.
For sure. Got a couple of comments. Sorry. Go ahead. Say that again, Greg. I didn't.
Somebody made a comment about baby T-Rex attack. Maybe, yeah. I don't know.
I wanted to first of all say hello to my friend Hyger and post a comment. He wants you to know, I guess, that the Ray Bradbury comics at Tops are awesome. He felt.
Thank you, Hyger. I love those books. I have a funny story. So we did those books in conjunction with Byron Preiss, and some of the material Byron had already commissioned for his graphic novels, and some of it we commissioned straight from scratch. But I mean, it had a very arty EC flair about it. And in fact, the first issue is a dino cover, which is probably my favorite Topps piece that I own. It's by William Stout, and it's The Sound of Thunder, which is my favorite Ray Bradbury short story. And we reprinted the EC version as well as the having the new story in there. But the funny story about Ray Bradbury was Ray Bradbury #1 is the first book to come out after Dracula. So it comes out February '93. And which means we got the numbers probably January '93, maybe. No, I was gonna say not December, probably January. Anyway, so remember I said Dracula had done about 150 to 200,000 is my memory, maybe a little bit over 200,000 on some of the issues, but it done very well. Everybody made money. So the orders for Ray Bradbury comics #1 was 75,000, which at the time was not terrible, but obviously wasn't a Dracula number.
Yeah.
And Arthur Shuren, who rarely left his office in the building unless he was just leaving the building entirely, Arthur came into my office and it scared the living crap out of me because he was the CEO of the company. Why is Arthur sticking his head in my office? And he goes, "Hi, Greg." He was a very, very friendly, funny guy. He said, "Hi, Greg. We're not in the business to make comics that only sell 75,000 copies." And he walked right out. That was the end of the conversation.
Wow.
So I was like, so I don't remember how many issues of Ray. I want to feel like maybe we published 5. I don't remember, but I know it was, look, we weren't going to miraculously find a way to make science fiction anthology comics work when EC and Marvel and other, DC, nobody had actually, look, anthology comics are tough. Science fiction was tough. We tried. I don't, and we had great, again, sort of a combination of what Byron was doing and what we were doing. We had great talent on those books, but
it's kind of like what I was saying earlier about Top sort of seemingly throwing everything they had against the wall to see if anything stuck, but it was the time to be taking risks like that because the industry was really, really strong. Right. So you might as well. Everybody's buying back.
It was. And again, a lot of people were blind ordering, thinking, okay, this will be good. And there was tremendous talent. It's just the at the end of the day, the consumer hadn't really changed much in 40 years. And people that, remember, Bill Gaines always said he loved the sci-fi comics more than the other ones, but they didn't sell as well as the other ones. So,
right.
He always said that.
I gotta say though, Greg, and I know for the time and context of the time, I get it. It's crap. But even in context for the times, had you told me in advance, hey, yeah, Ruben, you know what? We're thinking about getting the license for Ray Bradbury books and doing comic adaptations of them. What do you think? Honestly, back in 93, 4, whatever year it was, I would have said, Greg, are you fucking nuts? Do not waste your money giving Bradbury's estate or whatever.
Well, and that's fair. But again, I will say it was Byron who had done the sort of the initial work, and they had already published at least one of their versions of it. But Byron was, it was probably worth, they just did a Memories of Byron Price. What are those guys' names? The two Johns. Morrow. Morrow's publishing. Yeah, and the other. Yeah, I can't think of the other John. The guy who writes a lot. His name will come to me too. But in any event, they did a nice memory of Byron. One of the things that Byron had tremendous creative insight, but he just commercially sometimes his things, his attitude was, I love this, therefore the audience will come. If I build it, they will come. And sometimes they didn't. And so, seeing what we were doing, where we were forcing direct market distribution, we were forcing newsstand distribution, we kind of, we had the Topps name. It made sense to kind of do that. And he had already got the Ray Bradbury license, and Ray was always very generous about that stuff. So I doubt the license itself was any real problem. But if you want talented creators, you're going to have to pay them something. So,
yeah, for sure. So an old friend of mine, Mike Davis, asked a question a few minutes ago, and I want to get to that now, if you don't mind.
Okay.
And we're just going backwards a little bit to the Jurassic Park talk.
That's
and
fine.
he says, so question for Greg regarding the Jurassic artistic pairing of Kane and Pérez, somewhat an odd mix, but obviously works. What was the story, or if there was a story behind thinking of, hey, let's put those two guys together for that?
So I think that it's a great question. And ultimately, Jim made the final decision on creative talent for that adaptation.
Oh,
I think the thinking was, and Walter Simonson wrote the book, and of course Walter's well-known dinosaur nut, so he didn't want to draw it. He didn't have time, but he said he would. He said he would write it, and I think obviously if you can get a talent like George Perez involved, you're like, okay, but I can't let George pencil it because he's slow. And we're going to have likeness approvals, and we're going to have issues. But Gil's fast, and I think it just sort of it all came together in terms of having talent that you could market to the comic book community, right? Because you're gonna sell Jurassic Park to the mass market. But remember, movie adaptations, TV adaptations were never necessarily, because you had to solicit them so far in advance. They never necessarily were something that the direct market embraced with a passion. I'm putting it that way.
Right.
But if you put talent on it, and it was not like right away, it was an odd pairing, and we all were anxious to see those first inks come in.
Right.
And, George was really trying to do two things. He was trying to keep Gil looking like Gil, but at the same time, he was trying to sort of, put Perez details in that, the typical Gil inker might not have done.
Right. He still wants to Perezify it.
Yeah. So if you look at the scales on the dinosaurs, if you look at the foliage, it's Perez. It's not, but obviously, all the compositions and the likenesses are Gil.
The structure, the underlying structure, you can see it's Kane. But that's what I think works about it. That's why I think the pairing works in the sense that, yes, Mike is right. It's not two artists who you would ever really think to put together. Right. However, because they each have their own really strong styles, you can see the structure of like the way that a diamond, like again, if you're familiar with Jungle Action, what a dinosaur by Gil Kane looked like. Gil Kane's anatomy. It's very, very obvious. So, And we all know
that was the one. That was one thing where when I look at the pages I own, and when I look at the finished book, and when I look at other pages, the one thing I don't think was where it didn't quite. There was something about the way George inked the human figures that stiffened them up a little bit,
right?
Because there's obviously a looseness and a ballet to Kane's characters, and it was just something about the way that George tended to ink them to just kind of stiffen them a little bit, and it just sort of was like. But had the book been nothing but dinos and foliage, it would have been the best looking book ever. It really was great. I mean, the Perezifying, as you said, I think that's your word. Yeah. I mean, it was really something to watch. Those inks come in, after we had seen the pencils.
Yeah. I think it worked. And like I said, I think it's a credit to both of them having strong enough styles at what they do. That absolutely. I felt it didn't surprise me that ultimately you could still see the underlying structure looking like Kane, but with all the little details that George liked to do, and jazzing up the line.
And again, credit to everyone. They got, the book came out on time. Oh, I was going to answer, but it was funny. Okay, so this is like full circle, and we probably ought to get to the point where I answer one or two more questions. We wrap it up, but full circle back to that question about the letters. That's supposedly there's reference to a Wikipedia. That was a very funny. I just happened to catch that question. Hold on. Don't stand by. So basically, there was some confusion in the office. I shouldn't name the editorial person. It wouldn't be a nice thing. But they did not send the final shooting script to Walter. So Walter's adaptation of Jurassic is based on the second to last shooting script. And there are some minor differences, particularly in the early part of the film, that are slightly different in the finished film. And there was one thing I can even remember coming out of the premiere with Walter and Weezy and some other people. And I remember he was just kind of like, wasn't annoyed. He was just sort of like, I was like, somebody sent me those script pages, I would have fixed it. So there were probably some details that people caught. That's also, by the way, if you look at the original trailer for Jurassic Park, there's a scene in the trailer that's never been, that scene has never popped up in any special editions, or it's never popped up as an extra in any of the things. It's a scene when before they see the dinosaurs, when Ellie, Laura Dern's character, realizes that there are plants that don't belong there. And the scene's in the trailer. It survived the trailer, but it never made it into the finished film. So, but it's in our comic too, I think.
Okay.
So anyway.
Did you want to say anything to John's awesome question?
So everybody can Google who the Barbi Twins are. It was a crazy project. I don't even remember how it all came to be. Somehow Robert Conti was involved, and I just happened to text with Robert the other night about something else. So I just
sorry, Greg. Robert who?
Conti.
Oh, Robert Conti. Okay.
Robert Conti. Yeah. Anyway, we had these women at Comic-Con. They were lovely. They were like the nicest people to hang. I mean, in addition to their other virtues, they were just. They were lovely to hang. It was like it was like a pleasure to have them around. They were amused by the whole thing. That was a fun experience. Probably other people remember better than I did. Did we just do a one shot, or did we do more than that? I just kind of vaguely remember a one shot. Yeah, the Barbi Twins.
That's funny.
It could have been a crossover. It could have been a crossover with Bartman.
Spare me, please. Mike is asking another question, and for the rest of you, everybody, we got to go in about 10 minutes. All right, so we're closing out.
Yeah, just probably my safety zone is. Unfortunately, I just have another appointment, so
no worries.
My safety zone. Yeah, we'll do a part two. We'll do a part two someday.
Sure, but if anybody else wants to ask questions like Mike is doing, please get them in now. And so Mike asks again, even though we're kind of going backwards. I guess you missed it earlier, Mike, but maybe you could touch a little bit more upon this if you can, Greg. Another quick question regarding the Dracula, that today the work by Mignola and Nyberg is generally considered his apex. Is that true? Because I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that they consider that the apex of his career, Mike. Is that what you mean?
if Mike is, there are some people who consider Dracula Mignola's best work, and even ahead of that first Hellboy series. And again, it's the last thing he did before Hellboy. I don't, I never do best. I do favorite. What are the things I like? Doing best is a slippery slope. No matter what you're talking about, movies, comics, art, artists. It's always and I see Mike is saying, that the Dracula and the first two Hellboy series.
Yeah, I get the timing of it. I guess what I was surprised is that I would have thought, I was under the impression that the majority of people considered the Hellboy stuff to be,
Right. Actually, I want to. So I have a really great Dracula story, which it's going to be perfect to conclude the thing with. Anyway, so at the time we all knew it was coming in. It looked great. It was clearly better than Mike's previous work. In our opinion, we thought this looks better than Gaslight. It's not Batman, but it looks better than Gaslight. It looks better than Cosmic Odyssey. It looks better than some of the other stuff he had done. Obviously, Coppola fell in love with the guy's art immediately and said, "Hey, can you do some stuff for me?" I mean, again, maybe Coppola hasn't seen enough comic book artists. I don't know how much comic book art, I don't know how many comic books he stole from his nephew Nick. I don't know what it's like. I have no idea. Yeah. But there was we knew, yes. The answer to that question is yes, we knew it was special. I don't think we knew necessarily how special it was. But here's my final top/IDW crossover story. So Topps Comics pretty much closed up shop 97, 98. I was already gone from the comics. I was working on the trading card side. I didn't go back into full-time comics publishing until 2007 with IDW. First phone call probably I made that week. All right, maybe it wasn't the actual first phone call, but certainly one of the first calls I made that week was to Sony, Columbia Pictures. I'm like, I really want to reprint the Dracula book. Because at the time, 2007, Dracula was one of the only things of Mignola's that had not been reprinted. Cosmic Odyssey had been reprinted.
Right.
Of course, Gotham by Gaslight was still in print and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I called them. They said, absolutely not. We don't really have the rights. We're not sure what the rights are. I'm like, okay. Over the years at IDW, I would ask them every once in a while. They'd keep saying no. Simultaneously, IDW became a preferred partner of Sony Pictures. And, we did all the Ghostbusters stuff. We did them a tremendous amount of favors. And really, we had a great relationship. We had terrific Ghostbusters creative teams multiple times, editors, writers, just terrific. And we did some other, I can't necessarily remember off the top of my head what we had done for Sony, but Ghostbusters was a big piece of it. And they were happy. Ghost Corps was happy. People are getting checks. People are enjoying the creative. It's a wonderful relationship. And over time, some of the people that came in kind of in and out at Sony, they were all friends. Every year I don't think I put it on my calendar officially. I would ask, I really want to reprint this Dracula book. Finally, at this point, I was friends with everybody over there, finally, including legal. Finally, they came back to me and they said, all right, this is probably around 2017. They finally said, okay, for God's sake, stop nagging us. Will you sign an indemnification clause that says if anybody comes back on the rights issues, that IDW will take responsibility instead of Sony? And I said, I will sign that contract as fast as you send it to me. And they were like, why would you do that? I said, we're a public company. We have liability. I said, because, and they weren't hearing me. I said, because Coppola loved this adaptation so much that he hired Mike to do some work on the film. So I said, in your scenario, Winona Ryder's agent's going to call me and say, hey, we don't think you had the rights to reprint this book. And I'm going to say, yeah, you should call Coppola's agent about that and let me know what he says. Because at this point, why would you not want it back in print? You know what I mean? And if somebody's going to make a fuss about a royalty payment, I'm going to take care of that too. It's like, what? Okay, here's the standard. What am I going to pay? It's not going to be a lot of money. Keanu Reeves doesn't need my money. Gary Oldman doesn't. It's just, and you do get ornery age. So yes, we got that indemnification. We signed. It was the happiest contract I probably signed within a couple of years of that time. We finally got the book out, and we got a black and white version out first. Scott Doonbeer had actually, Scott's friends with Mignola, though this was completely unrelated.
Right.
Scott managed to find the black and white copies from our original art files that a German publisher had used to create the German edition of the collected edition, because the art was scattered to the wind. Christine Mignola told me that the very first European show they did after Dracula was done, they sold almost all of it at that show. And I don't know what, I don't know if that was Angoulême that year or Luca or whatever it was, but anyway, it was also, so a ton of the Dracula art is in Europe. Just
wow.
So anyway, but fortunately Scott found these black, and also all we had to do was re-letter it, and we did that, so we didn't change the integrity of the book. We did that by scanning in the letters from the comic book. So it's we had these nice clean black and white copies, and then we scan, and the lettering is very clean, so we did the black and white edition first, and the color edition came out afterwards of the Dracula book. Both sold well. The Mignolas, of course, were thrilled that it was back in print. Nobody ever complained. Everything was fine. Right. But for me, it was great because by the time those books came out, was it sort of the end of my IDW career, and the original ones had come out at the beginning of my Topps career. So it was like my end cap on both sides. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Dracula will always have a special place in my heart, if not a wooden stake in my heart.
Yeah. That's awesome. Before we go out, I just wanted to, and I wish Nicky B was still here. I figured I'd do it towards the end of my show, but I just wanted to remind you guys, here we go, to check out Nicky B show this Friday. I'm going to be selling some more art as always at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. And since I didn't do this earlier, I do want to put here, where is it? Here it is. I found it this time, Nick. I found it. The direct link to your episode. Here it is. I'm putting it in the chat for everybody. Everybody check out the show. If you don't, some nice entry-level art with some higher-end stuff mixed in from time to time. So check his show out this Friday and every Friday, please. Okay.
I've got to fly.
Yeah, gotta go. I appreciate you, Greg. Thank you again. I hope you had fun. I had a fun time.
I did. I like, these are, I'm sure as I get in the car in a few minutes, I'm sure I'm going to think of a few things that I could have remembered.
I know you will. I know. If it happens, you can always get in touch and let me know. We can do it again in the future, So
sure. It was a good 4 years. It was a crazy 4 years. Like I said, the comics lasted a little bit longer than I actually did working in the comic book division. I probably should use my last minute. So there were 4 people, who I worked with closely who are gone from those days, and all who made contributions. There was Charlie Novinsky, who was passed away. Charlie was like a editorial and marketing guy, and he basically came to New York on his own dime from Colorado or someplace, and it's a crazy story. But he'd been a huge fan of Jim's and a huge fan of Marvel, and was thrilled to be working at Topps. He's passed. Stacy Kimmel was a woman I hired. She was a terrific designer, and she did all our marketing designs, and she did special projects like T-shirts and stuff. And she's passed. And I mentioned Gabe Zorro, who was our printer, and we couldn't have done all that stuff with the trading cards or bags or glow-in-the-dark covers or any of that stuff without Gabe. And I love Peter's comment, by the way. Somebody said,
I know. That's why I'm leaving it there for you to see.
I love that. Yes, it was a pain in the neck. That's right. And then another part, again, so many different people collaborate on these things to make them work. We did all these Vampirella trading cards, which were probably a little bit more adult than some of the people in Topps management wanted, but they did well. And that was honestly, it was Melanie Crawford Chadwick, who is kind of an unheralded female creator / editor in the industry, and she passed away also, not during the pandemic, but not or maybe maybe complications from COVID related to some other complications. But anyway, yeah, it's weird. My point was I didn't want to close on a morose note. I have good memories of working with all these people, and just it reminds us that I'm here. I'm the one talking, but the whole thing is this giant collaborative effort. It just it
for sure
just is. It just
sure.
And
no one man handles.
Right. And someday somebody will be digging up. When we're all gone, they'll be digging up an archive on YouTube, and now I've made reference to some of the people that have passed before us. So
yeah.
Anyway, good folks. Good times over there. I'm still friends with a bunch of those people. So
it's a way to honor them anyway. So thank you again. Appreciate it, Greg. And we'll be in touch. Maybe we'll do something like this similar at some point down the road. I'm going to stay on just to give people the thumbnail for next week. But by all means, take off.
Fine. Thank you.
Safe drive.
Okay. Thank you so much. And
have a great time at San Diego, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. And again, anybody on the cast, if you see me, the usual places, Albert, Bashara, Berkey, any of you see me, just say hello and remind me who you are, because I'm not. The only face I see is Ruben's. It's a nice face, Bouncy. All right. Thanks, man.
All right, bye. All right. Bye-bye. And okay, everybody. So for you guys, mahalo to you, Carl. Appreciate it. Thank you, Thomas. Just going to leave you guys with the thumbnail for next week's episode. It will be going back to Comic Art Show and Tell. And that will be the 50th episode. Nice round number. Give Greg a wedgie. Marcus should give him a wedgie because he should see him at least at Albert's booth, No, we're not keeping the show going. I'm going to have an easy early night for myself as well, Caesar, but I appreciate you wanting to keep it going. Introduce yourself as John C. That's awesome. Exactly. I don't know what that means by Back to the Future. What do you mean by that? Yes, Dan, number 50. Keep in mind, though, Dan, not everyone was a collector, right? Sometimes I did some episodes on like 20-plus-year-old inventory I used to have, my dealer inventory, shows like that. So it's not all about show and tells on collectors' collections. But 50. And plus, some of my old Hangout episodes were also kind of show and tells because we still used to show art while we talked. So it's technically more than 50, I guess you can say, And let me know if that gets you a free drink, Marcus. Yeah, sci-fi movie chat time. It is not, Stanley. It is not. Look at this. We got a newbie just as we're closing it out. You'll have to catch the replay. 247 Comics. You got listen, just so you know, my channel is all about, it's geared around, it's structured around being very interactive with you guys. Even though I have guests in the studio with me, it's structured around chatting with everybody. So it's a place to hang out for all of us, including everybody in the chat. So if you can make it on time on any Sunday evening, that would be better. That's the fun, the most fun way to catch my content is when you're here live, because the episodes are technically long, usually 3 hours or more, but it doesn't feel like it's long when you're here live having fun with everybody as we all interact with each other, So please see if you can do that. I mean, of course, watch it on replay if you don't mind. I'd appreciate that too. Leave me a like if you don't mind. Hit the thumbs up. Would appreciate that. But try to come and catch us live if you can, whenever you can on Sunday nights. And what does Neon Dragon mean? Oh God, still my slow. It is absolutely. I appreciate it, Dan. I appreciate that, my friend. John Stephen commenting a lot on my posts on CAF lately. That's good. See, that's what the show is about, though, Tom. Right? We all get to know. That's why I want it to be interactive, because everybody gets to know each other a little bit. And then when they see each other on other social media sites and stuff, they interact with each other. You make friends that way. It's awesome. Coffee says, as long as there's one more comment to read, Ruben's show doesn't end. You know it, baby. Woo! Hey, I'm all about the people. You know that. That's what it's all about for me, baby. That's what it's all about. Look at that. 247 Comics knows Peter. Awesome. Great conversation. Thank you, Steve. That's why with me only being able to give the show about 50% of my attention. Appreciate that, man. Favorite part was that when the light came through the window and gave Greg a Frank Miller Sin City. Yeah, I was noticing that too, and it's surprised nobody mentioned it. That's awesome. I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Good to see you again, by the way. This was the drive-through version, certainly. And you are here for him. One more comment, Ruben, to read. Thank you. Do you think Lady Deadpool is Blake Lively? I do. Never get a lot of comments. Do you like Harrison Ford? I do not. All right, we're out of here. I'm out of here. Your comments it's not going to make it to the live broadcast on Rewind if you keep talking. So cut the comments out now. That'll be best for you. The prospects for Mission Football. Listen, I'm hoping for 9-3 at the very minimum, but still have higher hopes than that. But who knows? It could go worse. You never know. And I know you didn't really care. You just want to keep me talking. I know. Good night, Michael. Appreciate it. Thank you. Cat movie looks bad. I have no idea. Falcon never captured me. Yeah, who cares? Talk about Canadian weather. No, we won't. Just had a root beer float. I haven't. Still waiting to try it. Plenty to talk about. Jim Lee re-inking a vintage X-Men piece. Holy shit. I know you're on board with that, Caesar. You're definitely on board with that. I am not. I'm so out on that. I'm looking forward to seeing what it looks like in the end, but whatever. We'll see. Have a good week yourself, Steve. Thank you. We're not talking about that, Stuart. You guys are crazy. How about color math? What's your favorite movie? If you waste of my life and never lived until now. Nope. Sorry, guys. We are out of here. Thank you so much. But please catch me next week, as always, for Comic Art Show and Tell number 50 with Steve Davidge. That's my old buddy. And he has a really great collection, including the piece you see there in the background. One of my favorite artistic teams of all time, Kerry Gamble, Ricardo Villamonte. And it should be a lot of fun. Steve doesn't typically do a lot of stuff online. He's busy with family and whatnot, you know. A good night. And no, the answer is no. Or you never know, Southern Comic Geek. Sometimes always have stuff in the works, really. Betrayed by Jim Lee. A&W Root Beer Flow, betrayed by Jim Lee. Yeah, exactly. I feel like I am betrayed with what he's doing on that. I am not watching The Boys. Nice. Yeah, thank you, Kavi. It'll be fun. How do I say his name? His name is Steve Davidge. Steve Davidge. I thought it was, that's what I said. Steve Davidge. That's what I said. Steve Davidge. Now to watch House of Dragon. Have fun, guys. Have fun. Steve, how do you pronounce it? All right, guys. Have fun. Thanks again, as always, for all your support. Really appreciate it. And that's it. Have a great week, all of you. We will catch you next Sunday at the same time, same channel. Appreciate it. Peace out and go blue.